Chapter 1869. Seeing Jun Dingtian using the 3,000 great ways. Everyone's faces suddenly turned pale. No matter which camp they were from, they couldn't help but be frightened when they saw such a monster. The strength of Yi Shiwen and Qin Lai was still within the scope of their understanding, but Jun Dingtian's strength was far beyond their imagination. It could even be said that he was 100 times more terrifying than the most terrifying genius that they had imagined him to be. Whoosh! 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 One after another, the laws condensed and flew out. The 3,000 sword principles all manifested behind him, densely packed, covering the entire sky, shaking all directions. He stood in the void, and all the 3,000 sword principles condensed behind him, condensing into an incomparably powerful big sword. For a moment, the whole world was incomparably dark, and the sun and moon lost their light. All the Tao was suppressed, and some were even directly crushed. There was a terrible momentum, as if all the flowers were killed when the flower bloomed. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. He could feel that the increasingly terrifying aura was unceasingly crushing down on him. Even his qi was being suppressed and restrained by the net of lust. Such a terrible pressure almost immediately aroused Yi Shiwen's continuous resistance. The golden divinity in his body was unwilling to receive such pressure. It instantly boiled, burned wildly, and surged with a shocking momentum. It actually faintly resisted Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles. Yi Shiwen is also very strong. Look, he can actually withstand the pressure of the 3,000 sword principles. It's already shocking to be able to do this. If it wasn't for Jun Dingtian, Yi Shiwen might even have a chance to prove his Tao. In the future, he might very well become a corpse on the road of proving his Tao. Yes, that's right. He can withstand it now, but he's already at his limit. When Jun Dingtian makes his move, I'm afraid Yi Shiwen will completely collapse on the spot. Even I feel a sense of fear just by looking at it from afar. You can imagine how terrifying the 3,000 sword principles are, and what kind of pressure Yi Shiwen is facing now. If it wasn't for the formation and barrier that the Lord of Darkness had set up, I'm afraid this battle would have ended in a complete collapse. But what's the origin of this Jun Dingtian? Yi Shiwen is somewhat famous, but I've never heard of this Jun Dingtian. He's a monster! He's a monster! You're able to withstand the coercion of my 3,000 sword principles. That alone is enough to put you at the top of your generation. Unfortunately, you've met me. I'm fundamentally different from you guys. Do you understand? Jun Dingtian seemed to be interested in talking to Yi Shiwen. It was rare for him to be willing to talk to Yi Shiwen. Different? What's the difference? Although I don't know which race you belong to, you're still far from it. Yi Shiwen stirred up the surging golden divinities to resist the coercion of Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles. You're digging your own grave. I don't mind telling you how you think the Lord of Darkness died. He died in my hands. Jun Dingtian said coldly. Are you kidding me? I'm afraid the Lord of Darkness could kill you with just one look. Yi Shiwen had some doubts in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He sneered. How would you stupid mortals know that I'm the reincarnation of a deity? The Lord of Darkness died after my 3,000 sword principles broke his law and shattered his divine kingdom. How dare you compare yourselves to me? As my memory gradually recovers, I'll soon regain my previous strength. The gap between you and me will only get bigger and bigger. Jun Dingtian finally revealed a shocking secret. Everyone was stunned. They were a little scared out of their wits, not daring to believe what their ears had just heard. Reincarnation of a deity? Was there really a reincarnation of a deity in this world? Everyone couldn't believe it. They knew that deities existed, but they were just experts who had proven their Tao. However, that was a long, long time ago. Even in the Xian world, how many people had actually seen a deity? Even legends about deities were few and far between. Even if they were divine sons or those who had awakened the bloodline of the gods, they were already very rare. And these people were the experts who supported the entire profound world. These people were more or less related to the deities. They could become the top experts in the world by relying on some martial arts, magic treasures, or other wealth left by the deities. These people were only related to the deities. No one knew what the real reincarnation of a deity was like. Over the years, there had been all kinds of legends about the reincarnation of deities and goddesses. Many top geniuses were also crowned with the title of the reincarnation of a deity. However, it was often proven that these gimmicks were just gimmicks. They were not true at all. No one had ever really admitted that they were the reincarnation of a deity. At most, they had obtained some inheritance of a deity by chance. This was the first time they heard of such a thing. Once the news spread, the whole world would go crazy. No matter how reserved the experts in the Xian world were, they would go crazy when it was related to the Tao validation or deities. In the profound world, as long as it was related to Tao proving or eternal life, everyone would go crazy. Just like the inheritance of the Lord of undead spirits. Even though everyone knew that most of them had no chance and might even die prematurely due to the corrosion of the death chi here, they still came here without hesitation because they had no other choice. They had no other choice but to give it their all. It was conceivable that once the news spread, even Jun Dingtian would be endlessly hunted down, unless he had the protection of a colossus like the Heaven Wasteland Palace. But for now, he didn't seem to have a strong background. He didn't understand it before, but now he seemed to be able to understand it. If he was really the reincarnation of a god, then he wouldn't need the guidance of others, nor would he need the protection of other forces. He could stand on his own. However, he hadn't grown up yet. So, where did his confidence come from? Everyone was pondering over this question. Almost at this moment, everyone seemed to have thought of something. Suddenly, they were shocked. Could it be that he wants to slaughter all of us? Indeed, if everyone here were to die, then this news would naturally not be leaked. If they hadn't thought of this possibility before, they suddenly thought of it now. Based on the strength that Jun Dingtian had shown, it wasn't impossible. On the contrary, it was quite possible. Thinking of this, everyone's face suddenly turned pale. If Jun Dingtian really had such an idea, then they wouldn't be able to escape today, no matter what. With the cultivation of the 3,000 sword principles, even an expert in the profound death realm wouldn't be able to withstand it. I've seen too many of you so-called geniuses in my previous and current lives. Those who can truly cross the threshold of Tao validation are few and far between. Those who can are all trash. Jun Dingtian said bluntly. That's right. For him, there was no such thing as a genius. The only difference was whether or not one could achieve Tao validation. Everything else was the same. They were all ants. There was no difference. At this time, thousands of thoughts flashed through Yi Shiwen's mind, constantly combining into useful information. From Jun Dingtian's words, it wasn't difficult to determine that the death of the Lord of Darkness had a lot to do with him. However, why didn't he take away the Lord of Darkness's treasury after killing him? If he was really a deity, then it shouldn't be difficult. Then there was only one possibility left. He couldn't do it. What could make a deity unable to do it for countless years? The result was obvious. There was only one result that corresponded with his reincarnation, and that was that he also passed away. In that battle, both sides should have suffered great losses. The Lord of Darkness passed away, while Jun Dingtian was slightly better. He didn't die completely. His original spirit should have reincarnated. This was the only possibility that could explain the current situation. In the face of Jun Dingtian's aggressive attitude, he was very clear that Jun Dingtian wanted to completely destroy his mental defense in order to achieve the effect of subduing him without a fight. Whether or not we can achieve Tao validation can only be determined by time. However, even if you did, so what? Didn't you still die? What's the difference between you and us ants in your eyes? Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. You're just a loser. What qualifications do you have to be so noisy? Jun Dingtian's expression suddenly changed. From just now until now, he had been looking down on ants. He didn't care about what the others said at all. However, Yi Shiwen's words had firmly poked his soft spot. Indeed, he used to be incomparably glorious. However, what was the use of that? That was many, many years ago. It wasn't the present anymore. So what if he achieved Tao validation? After countless years, he still died. What was the difference between him and those mortals who turned into a cup of soil? I think you're really tired of living. Jun Dingtian, immediately stopped talking to Yi Xuan. The long sword in his hand instantly pierced out. In the void, endless power swept in all directions. The sword aura tore the sky and went straight for Yi Xuan's head. Chapter 1870. Jun Dingtian was completely infuriated by Yi Xuan. He did not hold back at all. He wanted to eliminate Yi Xuan in an instant. The sword essences surged and formed an overwhelming momentum, enveloping Yi Xuan completely, not giving him any chance to breathe. Boom! Yi Xuan raised his hand and stabbed with his sword. Boom! A loud roar swept across the area. Sword chi and golden sword will overflowed in the void. This was a terrifying power that was boiling. Yi Xuan's long sword that was condensed from the golden divinity in his hand was destroyed in an instant. Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles were too overbearing. They contained almost all sword principles. Any kind of sword essences could be found in his 3,000 sword principles. As soon as he attacked, it was overwhelming. After he attacked with all his strength, Yi Xuan realized that Jun Dingtian's skill was far above his. Although it was not as exaggerated as 3,000 times, it was far beyond Yi Xuan's. He could not believe it at first. With the degree of his tyrant body, it could be said to be one of the most perfect bodies in the world. He would not lose to anyone in the same realm. However, he could not catch up with Jun Dingtian's skill. Jun Dingtian's long sword was only slightly offset by Yi Xuan's attack, but it still went straight towards Yi Xuan. Yi Xuan took advantage of this slight opening. His body turned into a ball of golden light and dodged the attack. When he reappeared, he was already far away. His eyes were extremely cold. Jun Dingtian's strength was too strong. He was stronger than anyone he had fought before. There was a flash of wisdom in his eyes. The mysterious space in his body was constantly analyzing Jun Dingtian's situation. Yi Xuan wanted to find a reason why Jun Dingtian was so overbearing. He did not believe that Jun Dingtian's physique cultivation technique was so much more overbearing than the tyrant body. How could it contain such a powerful skill? It was almost impossible for someone at the peak of the profound life realm to do so. There must be some special method. Jun Dingtian did not give him any chance to breathe. He attacked again with his sword. The 3,000 sword principles were like the sands of the Ganges River. They were dense and endless. They swept over in an instant. Endless sword chi surged out from his body. This won't do. I won't be able to analyze anything like this. I can only fight him with all my strength. Only then will I be able to discover the secret of his strength. Only then will I be able to improve further. Although Yi Xuan was facing such a tyrannical attack, his eyes were extremely calm, without a trace of panic. It was as if everything in Jun Dingtian was within his calculations. At this moment, he was not like a human at all, but a huge computer, a supercomputer. His clothes were cut by the sword chi, and the sword will condense from the sword in his hand swept in all directions. It was almost natural, and there were no flaws. In other words, the sword will that he had inherited from the king was not inferior to Jun Dingtian's sword will in essence. It was just that he had not perfected it yet. However, there was still a huge gap between their skills. Every stroke of Jun Dingtian's sword could kill an expert at the peak of the profound life realm. Even an ordinary expert at the peak of the profound life realm would not be able to react in time. Clang! Yi Xuan barely managed to block Jun Dingtian's sword. The golden sword in his hand was completely shattered again. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Everyone's faces were gloomy. At this time, all of their hopes were on Yi Xuan. If Yi Xuan couldn't defeat Jun Dingtian, they would probably be annihilated today. The reason why they didn't escape at this time was not because they trusted Yi Xuan, but because they found that they had been firmly locked by Jun Dingtian's divine thoughts. They had absolute reason to believe that if they dared to escape, they would probably be killed by Jun Dingtian's sword. Jun Dingtian was only focusing on Yi Xuan, but it did not mean that he did not have the strength to do so. They dared not take the risk. Therefore, at this time, they could only hope that Yi Xuan could perform amazingly. However, after seeing Yi Xuan being sent flying and killed by the sword, everyone's faces suddenly fell. Although they had already expected it, they still could not accept it when they saw it. Jun Dingtian had hidden his strength before, so they could not see anything. But now, with his full strength, Yi Shiwen, the peerless demon who had fought against two people at once, held back Zhang Ming and Chu Yun, and almost killed them, was actually no match for him. Their future was simply bleak, but now was not the time to completely lose hope, so they did not take any action yet. What should we do? How long can Yi Shiwen last? I have already sent out a distress signal, but even if they know the news, they can't rush over in such a short time. By the time they get here, our corpses will probably be cold for a long time. Although Yi Shiwen is amazing, he is just a mortal after all. How can he be compared with the reincarnation of a god? Yes, the reincarnation of such an ancient big shot has all kinds of innate advantages that ordinary people do not have. As long as they get their memories back, their martial arts experience will soon come in handy. For them, the obstacles of the realm do not exist at all. As long as they can quickly accumulate skills, their cultivation can advance by leaps and bounds in a short time. Yes, no wonder we have never heard of Jun Dingtian before. When we were paying attention to him previously, he had just stepped into the profound life realm. How long has it been? And he has actually stepped into the peak of the profound life realm. It's incredible. I have never seen such a terrifying cultivation speed. You overestimate yourself? Jun Dingtian sneered and blasted Yi Shiwen away with his sword. He felt like he had taken a deep breath and felt much better all of a sudden. The suffocating feeling of being stabbed in the ribs by Yi Shiwen just now was also much better. His next wave of attack had almost arrived in the blink of an eye, not giving Yi Shiwen any chance to breathe. In terms of martial arts experience, he was much more profound than Yi Shiwen. How could he make such a mistake and let the tiger return to the mountain? His sword momentum was getting more and more terrifying with each wave. The 3,000 sword principles were completely materialized, crushing everything in front of him. Just when his sword was about to slash Yi Shiwen in half, Yi Shiwen's body suddenly burst with the light of the power of life and death, which turned into a picture scroll to block in front of him. Clang! A loud roar sounded, and the sword intent slashed the yin-yang life and death pattern, directly causing violent fluctuations. Even the yin-yang life and death pattern faintly let out a mournful cry, as if it could feel how terrifying this sword was. No, if this goes on, even the yin-yang life and death pattern might not be able to hold on. Yi Shiwen's eyes were filled with horror. Jun Dingtian's attack was much more powerful than he had imagined. Much more powerful than he had imagined. Yin-yang life and death pattern. Isn't this the magic treasure of that old man? Why is it in your hands? Although it's incomplete, it's enough. As soon as Jun Dingtian saw the yin-yang life and death pattern, the distant memory that had been dormant in his mind suddenly awakened. He suddenly remembered the origin of the yin-yang life and death pattern, and his eyes suddenly lit up. The yin-yang life and death pattern was a well-known existence even among the divine tools. Even a top figure like Jun Dingtian had heard of it and coveted it. If it weren't for the fact that the owner of the yin-yang life and death pattern was so powerful, the yin-yang life and death pattern would have caused a war. The heavens are really helping me. It seems that the day of my rebirth is just around the corner. Jun Dingtian laughed to his heart's content. He was really lucky today. He didn't expect to get the flag of the Lord of Darkness and the yin-yang illustration of life and death. It seemed that there was always a way out. He had already proven his Tao, yet he had still died. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to him, who had his eyes on the top of his head. Every person who could prove their Tao was not only skilled in martial arts and had reached the acme of perfection. More importantly, every one of them had a long luck and could survive after experiencing all kinds of battles. However, once a god fell, it meant that their boundless luck had been used up, and it was extremely difficult to make a comeback. Although his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, as if he was sitting on a rocket, he actually didn't have much confidence that he could prove his Tao again. Luck was something that was hard to predict. If the heavens didn't give it to you, it would be useless no matter how hard you worked. Now that he was able to obtain 2 incomplete divine tools, it was enough to prove that the heavens still cared for him. How could he not be happy? Although he hadn't gotten his hands on the two incomplete divine tools to him, they were already in the bag. The only difference was when he would get them. If you want to get them, exchange them with your life. Just when he was feeling proud, Yi Shiwen's cold voice suddenly appeared behind him. He didn't know when, but Yi Shiwen had already touched his back. A terrifying force swept out instantly. The sword intent traversed the sky and directly slammed down on Jun Dingtian's head. When did he get there? Everyone was extremely shocked because they didn't realize that Yi Shiwen's movements were so fast. It seemed like he was still far away a moment ago, but suddenly he was behind Jun Dingtian. Was there still a possibility of a comeback? Chapter 1871. Hope was ignited in everyone's hearts. Yi Shiwen was their only hope at this moment. The consequences would be unimaginable if Yi Shiwen was defeated. While everyone was still in shock, the sword in Yi Shiwen's hand had already approached Jun Dingtian's head, as if it would blow him up in the next second. At this moment, Jun Dingtian suddenly turned his body with lightning speed. He waved his hand, and a shocking sword light sprayed out, as if he was going to cut Yi Shiwen in half alive. It's useless. Do you think you could defeat me with such a sneak attack? A disdainful smile flashed across Jun Dingtian's mouth. He did not take Yi Shiwen seriously at all. Absolute strength gave him absolute tyrannical means. He was not afraid of Yi Shiwen's tricks at all. It was just like how Sun Wukong could never get out of Buddha's five-finger mountain. Clang! Two huge sword lights fiercely slashed together in the void. Unsurprisingly, Jun Dingtian's sword intention directly obliterated Yi Shiwen's sword intention. Then, it continued to sweep across, as if it was going to cut Yi Shiwen in half in an instant. However, at this moment, Yi Shiwen seemed to be prepared for it. He directly turned into a ball of golden light, causing the sword to slash the air. In the distance, Yi Shiwen's figure appeared with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. He had forcibly suppressed his injury in exchange for this opportunity to attack. However, it was useless. As he had expected, Jun Dingtian's strength was far beyond his. Such a small trick would not work. Just like when Zhang Ming and Chu Yun teamed up to deal with him. It was useless. They were no match for him at all. Even when the two of them teamed up, it was useless. This was the crushing of absolute strength. Even so, he did not stop. He took a step forward and disappeared in midair. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Jun Dingtian. The tip of his sword directly slashed at Jun Dingtian from a tricky angle. Clang! A loud sound of metal colliding directly announced that Yi Shiwen's sneak attack this time was useless. However, it seemed as if Yi Shiwen would never get tired. The moment this wave of offensive had just stopped, the next wave of offensive had already pounced on him to kill. Clang! 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 The silhouettes of both sides were constantly emitting astonishing collision sounds in the void. Yi Shiwen was constantly blasted out, but every time he was blasted out, he would stubbornly climb back up and relaunch his charge. In the eyes of the crowd, he was like Don Quixote, already stupid. This Yi Shiwen is crazy. It's obviously useless. Why is he still launching attacks? Some people were puzzled. They could see that Jun Dingtian's strength was far beyond Yi Shiwen's. In other words, no matter how many times Yi Shiwen attacked, he wouldn't be able to pose any threat to him. But he still did it. What was the reason? Many people didn't understand. Is he crazy? It's impossible for him to find Jun Dingtian's flaw. Jun Dingtian might have a flaw, but Yi Shiwen can't find it. Many people present had the same opinion. They were all experts with rich experience, so they could see it clearly. No, it's the opposite. It's precisely because he's not Jun Dingtian's opponent that he has to take the initiative. He's already not Jun Dingtian's opponent. If he can't take the initiative, even the rhythm of the battle will fall into Jun Dingtian's control. That's really hopeless, Qin Lai said with a frown. At this time, he had already taken advantage of the battle between Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian to recuperate. Although he couldn't leave, it didn't prevent him from analyzing the battle between the two. In all fairness, both of them were called the heroes of their generation. Either one of them was far above him. If he were to fight with Yi Shiwen now, the outcome would probably be similar to the current battle between Yi Shiwen and Jun Dingtian. It was a pity that there was a saying, since there's a Yu, there's also a Liang. Since there's Yi Shiwen, there's also an even more monstrous existence like Jun Dingtian. After knowing that Jun Dingtian was the reincarnation of a god, his heart suddenly felt balanced. Although he might not be very old, the reincarnation of a god couldn't be calculated with normal logic. When he recovered his memories and martial arts experience, he would be equivalent to a genius who had cultivated for countless years. How could ordinary people be his opponent? This was also a matter of course, not to mention that Jun Dingtian was once a god. However, he could still see that Yi Shiwen's imposing aura was gradually weakening. Every time he was sent flying, his injuries would worsen, his imposing aura would weaken, and his movements would gradually slow down. How could he not see it? Yi Shiwen took the initiative to attack, and indeed seized the initiative of the battle. However, Huang Fang's strength was too far apart. Yi Shiwen's defeat was only a matter of time. It was nothing more than delaying this time to a later period of time. Jun Dingtian, who was in the middle of the battlefield, was even more surprised. As the saying goes, the onlookers see the game more clearly. In fact, at this time, there was no one who knew the current situation better than him. He had never been lenient in his attacks. Although the rhythm of the battle was controlled by Yi Shiwen, in fact, if one didn't have enough tyrannical strength, controlling the rhythm of the battle would become a joke. It was simply impossible. If it were an ordinary profound life realm, it would be useless to imitate Yi Shiwen's tactics. He would be directly pierced by his sword and killed directly. There was no other outcome. Yi Shiwen's tenacity had already exceeded his imagination to be able to persist until now with injuries. Whether it was physical strength, speed, or understanding of martial arts, Yi Shiwen could be said to be the best among his peers. If he hadn't met Jun Dingtian, it was indeed possible for him to prove his Tao. However, this was only a possibility. There were many corpses on the road to prove his Tao. It was enough to have Jun Dingtian alone. Thinking of this, he was no longer anxious. How could he not see what Qin Lai could see? Yi Shiwen was just a cornered beast fighting, and it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. As he thought of this, his movements were not the slightest bit slow. All kinds of amazing moves, sword essences, and sword techniques that had never been seen or heard of were directly displayed. It was like mercury spilling on the ground, pouring out in torrents, and splitting the vast sky. The battle between the two completely shattered the void. Both sides had gone crazy, especially Yi Shiwen, who didn't hold back at all. The tyrannical strength of his tyrant body was also reflected incisively and vividly at this time. He was like a crazy demon, constantly attacking, seizing the initiative of the battle, and delaying the time of his defeat. As the others had guessed, Yi Shiwen was indeed delaying time. However, it wasn't because he was delaying time for defeat, but because he was analyzing the reason why Jun Dingtian was so tyrannical. He seemed to be a crazy demon, attacking Jun Dingtian without a moment's pause. He was blasted away, rushed up again, and was blasted away again. He kept repeating this process for who knew how many times. Both sides were left in the void, and many people couldn't see clearly anymore. The Tempest wings behind him were also unreservedly displayed. Without the Tempest wings, it would be impossible for him to keep up with the speed of Jun Dingtian's swordsmanship. However, if anyone could see his eyes, they would find that they were extremely calm. Jun Dingtian was extremely calm, because he was sure that he would win, while Yi Shiwen's heart was as still as water, unaffected by everything, without the slightest fluctuation. He was like an emotionless robot, constantly calculating. Time! Yi Shiwen shouted in his heart. He needed time now. Through the crazy collisions with Jun Dingtian, he seemed to have finally grasped the mystery of Jun Dingtian's strength. It was just like following the vines to the melon. He wanted to find out the mystery, and the mystery that would make his strength to the next level. However, time waited for no man. His physical condition was getting worse. Although he was extremely calm, like a robot, he was very clear about his own physical condition. Even with the tyrannical tyrant body, he was not far from collapsing. He needed time. Unfortunately, when he needed time, time waited for no one. Yi Shiwen's injuries were constantly worsening. Although he was forcibly suppressing his injuries and fighting with Jun Dingtian, it couldn't delay the injuries of his body. This was under the condition that he had the Phoenix regeneration technique to heal himself. Without the Phoenix regeneration technique, even with the tyrant body, he would have collapsed long ago. Time passed minute by minute. Everyone's heart gradually sank. Yi Shiwen's whole body seemed to be soaked in blood. Blood was gushing out from every pore of his body. This was a sign that his internal organs had been shaken. His whole body looked like a bloody man, and his movements were getting slower and slower. It seemed like he had really reached his limit, completely at his limit, and was about to collapse. I finally figured it out. Yi Shiwen let out a loud shout, and his entire body was sent flying. But this time, he simply couldn't get up. He fell heavily on the ground and directly created a big pit. He was even more miserable than Qin Lai. Is everything going to end? Everyone thought unwillingly. This was not only Yi Shiwen's failure, but also the death of all of them. At this time, only Yi Shiwen was still persevering. The real elemental energy in his body was constantly circulating, trying to break through, trying to make himself stronger. Although I don't know what you figured out, it's useless. Go to hell. Jun Dingtian directly sprinkled out a shocking sword light and slashed at Yi Shiwen. Chapter 1872. The sword radiance tore a crack in the sky and went straight for Yi Shiwen's head. Boom! A thunderous roar was heard. The terrifying sword radiance was caught by a giant demonic hand. This demonized big hand was directly pierced by this terrifying sword light, but it stopped 3 inches in front of Yi Shiwen's forehead. Who is it? Jun Dingtian's face turned cold as he looked into the void. In the void, a monstrous demonic aura gushed out and swept in all directions. It was extremely terrifying. Vaguely, a figure could be seen standing in the midst of this monstrous demonic aura. What kind of demon is this? How dare you be so insolent in front of me? Jun Dingtian was disdainful. He immediately raised his sword and went straight to the sky. He did not continue to chase after Yi Shiwen. Instead, he wanted to get rid of the figure in the demonic aura first. Clang! A huge explosion sounded. The sword radiance was blocked. Endless demonic aura devoured everything, including the sword radiance. In the void, there was a huge wheel that was spinning faintly in the void, blocking everything, all the surprise attacks. Playing tricks. Jun Dingtian snorted coldly and began to get serious. He took a step forward, and the sword radiance flowed out like mercury. It swept everything and directly broke into the mass of demonic aura. Boom! There was a shocking explosion. A huge mushroom cloud slowly rose from the ground. The endless demonic aura was blown away. At this time, everyone could finally see clearly that there was a woman in the center of the demonic aura. She was dressed in a palace dress, and her face was as cold as frost. Some people recognized her on the spot. Isn't this Princess Tianqing of the Country of Darkness? How is this possible? That's Princess Tianqing. How can she be so powerful? Everyone shuddered. They could all feel that the aura of Princess Tianqing was extremely strong. It was even more tyrannical than some of the experts at the peak of the profound life realm that they had seen. How is this possible? Many of them had seen Princess Tianqing before. However, none of them could see that she had hidden such a deep level of strength. It was incredible. With such strength, even among the younger generation of the entire Xian world, he was an outstanding figure. How could they not have seen such a figure before? Too strong. This kind of strength is even stronger than Zhan Ming. Someone couldn't help but murmur. It was especially so for the princes of the Dark Nation. At this moment, their faces suddenly turned pale. If they could still compete with each other before, then after Princess Tianqing successfully stepped into the peak profound life realm, the gap in strength between them had become so huge that there was almost no suspense for the throne of the Dark Nation. Even without the divine weapon, the throne would not be able to escape Princess Tianqing's grasp. At this time, their faces were filled with incomparable unwillingness. They had been fighting against each other for so many years, but in the end, Princess Tianqing had taken advantage of them. Countless years of hard work had actually become a wedding dress for someone else. This kind of feeling made them want to die. That's impossible. Hasn't her strength always been at the king rank? Everyone was in disbelief. Among them, Yi Shiwen was the most incredulous. Because when everyone thought that she had hidden her strength, only Yi Shiwen knew that she had not hidden her strength. Because she had even stepped into the profound life realm not long ago. She had seen it with her own eyes not long ago. It was not like others thought that she had hidden her strength. Up until now, she had only just stepped into the profound life stage. Just what kind of fortuitous encounter did she have during the period of time that he had been gone? She had actually managed to leap 3 levels in cultivation, allowing her to step into the peak of the profound life stage in one go. This was simply inconceivable. He looked carefully. At this moment, Princess Tianqing's face was ashen, as if she was enduring some kind of powerful pressure. It was very likely that she had received some kind of power transfer. Only in this way could she possibly step into the peak profound life realm in one fell swoop. Even now, she had not digested all the power in her body, which caused the demonic aura to fill the sky. But even so, Princess Tianqing had already stepped into the peak profound life realm in such a short period of time. It was shocking enough. No wonder she was so confident that she could ascend to the throne without relying on the divine weapon. With her strength in the peak profound life realm, she indeed did not need to rely on the divine weapon to be able to dominate the country of darkness. June Dingtian could immediately tell that Princess Tianqing had received some kind of inheritance, but it was obvious that she had not digested all the power. Otherwise, she would not be in such a state. But to him, it made no difference. The 3,000 sword principles were instantly launched again, turning into countless sword lights. Like a meteor streaking across the sky, they directly went towards Princess Tianqing. No matter what kind of inheritance she had inherited, since she dared to stand in his way, there was only one outcome for her: death. Facing the meteor-like sword lights, Princess Tianqing's face was cold. She directly punched out, and the fist intent in the void turned into a huge 6 paths of reincarnation. The huge 6 paths of reincarnation emitted a terrifying light and clashed with the sword intent in the sky. Tit for tat, Princess Tianqing had no intention of retreating. Boom! 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 The battle between the two was like brilliant fireworks in the void, constantly tearing the sky apart and falling into the chaos. The 6 paths of reincarnation were constantly being torn apart by the sword lights, but they were constantly being repaired by her. Princess Tianqing kept retreating under June Dingtian's strong attack. Obviously, even at this time, the inheritance she had obtained from an unknown place was not as domineering as June Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist is indeed amazing. Back then, the Azura Demon King relied on it to dominate the world. But it's a pity that your skills are far from perfect, just like the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist. June Dingtian praised the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, but he was dismissive of Princess Tianqing. At the side, Qin Lai's face showed a mixture of shame and anger. His defeat was equivalent to losing the face of 2 great emperors, and he could not forgive himself. Even if the opponent was a reincarnation of a god, such a heaven-defying monster. You'll know whether I've reached home or not if you try. Princess Tianqing did not have the slightest bit of cowardice in the situation where she was constantly at a disadvantage. She kept blasting out the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Her body constantly spewed out the purest devil chi, constantly supporting her body. Originally, a cultivation method like the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was very strenuous even for her. But now, it was as if it was free. She kept blasting it out. Boom! 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 As time went by, even June Dingtian's face showed signs of anxiety and impatience. Although he kept beating Princess Tianqing, her skills were too strong, and he could not hurt her for a while. It should be said that it was difficult to hurt her before her skills were exhausted. Although he was confident that he would be the final winner, he did not have that much time. When the experts of the major forces arrived, he would definitely be the one being hunted down. After all, there was the profound death realm above the profound life realm. But at this time, Princess Tianqing was not having a good time either. She was forcibly digesting the monstrous skills, and at this time, she still had a fight with Jun Dingtian. It was killing her. Had it not been for the fact that she had been preparing for this moment all these years, she would have already collapsed. However, she still gritted her teeth and held on. She glanced at Yi Shiwen, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. At this time, she could only count on Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't abandon her and leave alone in the past. First, there was Yi Shiwen, and then there was Princess Tianqing. There are so many geniuses in this world, but it is precisely because of this that we have hope. Although the 3,000 sword principles is powerful, Jun Dingtian can't keep using it. No one can bear such amazing combat power at this time. There must be some time limit. If this continues, we may still have hope. Someone said, and it immediately resonated with everyone. Thinking about it, it was really possible, but they did not think in this direction at all. Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing might have persisted for so long, but if it were them, they might not even be able to withstand a single move and would have been completely killed. At this time, everyone's eyes turned to Yi Shiwen, who was sitting on the ground with his legs crossed. At this time, would he have enough time to recover? Everyone knew that he was injured just now, and his life was hanging by a thread. In such a short period of time, to what extent could he recover was still a problem. At this time, Yi Shiwen, who was expected by everyone, was constantly adjusting his breath. The breath on his body fluctuated between strong and weak, as if he was constantly transforming, but also as if he would stop breathing at any time. Everyone was afraid that he would not be able to hold on and stop breathing. The faint cry of a phoenix could be heard coming from his body. He didn't look well on the surface. However, he was actually full of vitality inside. Everyone had thought that he had gone crazy, but he had been constantly comprehending the Tao principles. Everyone had underestimated his phoenix regeneration technique. Princess Tianqing had bought enough time for him. Although his breath seemed unstable on the surface, in fact, he had already recovered to 70% to 80%. What really troubled him was how to become more powerful. Recovering to 70% to 80% was meaningless, and he was still not a match for Jun Dingtian. He had already fallen into deep thought. Chapter 1873. When he was fighting with Jun Dingtian, he attacked crazily, forcing Jun Dingtian to use all his strength. Although he was seriously injured, it was not without results. On the contrary, he saw a lot of things and deduced a lot of things from the fight between the two of them. Countless possibilities flashed in his mind, and he eliminated the wrong ones one by one. At the same time, his divine thoughts did not let go of the two people fighting in the void. He continued to observe and confirm his previous guess. After a long time, he finally came to a conclusion. Sure enough, as he had guessed, the reason why Jun Dingtian was so powerful was not because his strength was much stronger than Yi Shiwen, but because he integrated the extra strength into his swordsmanship. It could even be said that his 3,000 swordsmanship were all peerless swordsmen. His strength was usually scattered among the 3,000 swordsmanship, and when it was concentrated at a critical moment, it was the guarantee of monstrous strength. This was a direction that he had never thought about, but Jun Dingtian had opened a new door for him. He dispersed his strength into martial arts and formed something like an external incarnation, which was very powerful. Once used, all these martial arts incarnations could be concentrated, and their strength would skyrocket countless times in an instant, enough to crush any enemy. This was originally just his guess, but after a period of time, he finally confirmed his guess. At this time, Yimo was not here, so there was no way to ask the experienced old devil. However, he was confident that he was close to the truth, and that was about it. Although this was what he said, it was extremely difficult to actually do it. Even before Jun Dingtian, he had never heard of it, let alone doing it. He deduced it himself, and it was very difficult to actually complete it, but it gave him a new direction to move forward. Once he mastered it, he would be able to be like Jun Dingtian, dominating the same realm. Yi Shiwen named this method as martial arts doppelganger. Although the time was still short, and he had no way to condense a martial arts doppelganger, but just by comprehending this, he felt that his realm had advanced by leaps and bounds. Some of the things that he didn't understand before had instantly become clear thanks to this breakthrough. In other words, in this short time, he felt that his strength had increased to another level. Although it was still not comparable to Jun Dingtian, who used 3,000 swordsmanship, it was already monstrous and abnormal. After deducing the cause and effect, Yi Shiwen also knew the advantages and disadvantages of martial arts incarnation like the back of his hand. Although the martial arts doppelganger was extremely tyrannical, and once used, it was invincible, but it also had a huge flaw, and that was that it could not be used for a long time because to use so many martial arts at the same time, it required a huge amount of power to support it. Jun Dingtian could not fight like this forever, and as long as he could drag the time, he was confident that he could defeat Jun Dingtian. After all, although Jun Dingtian was tyrannical before, it was still within the scope of Yi Shiwen's ability to deal with. What was really tyrannical was when he used martial arts incarnation, which instantly increased his strength by several times. It was terrifying. It was a secret technique that could make a person who was already at the peak of the profound life realm increase his strength by several times in one go. Such a secret technique was rare in the world. It was a bit similar to the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist, but the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist was more brilliant, and it secretly catered to the way of heaven and earth. Just using the Heavenly Emperor Divine Fist alone had great power, and could increase one's strength by several times in one go. After having a direction, he suddenly felt that Jun Dingtian was not so scary. All cowardice came from ignorance, and once he knew, there was nothing to be afraid of. After sorting out these things, Yi Shiwen felt that there was only light in front of him, and his state of mind had improved by leaps and bounds. It was a kind of relief and carefree feeling after defeating a strong enemy. Just when everyone's eyes were focused on Princess Tianqing and Jun Dingtian, they heard a shrill, piercing sound, and the void was torn in half on the spot. Then, a huge axe came out of it, raised high, and directly chopped down towards Yi Shiwen. Everything happened too fast, and by the time everyone realized it, the axe was already not far from Yi Shiwen's forehead. No one could react to the sudden change, and they did not expect that someone would attack Yi Shiwen at this time. Zhanming, it's Zhanming! Qin Lai immediately reacted. He was all too familiar with that axe. In fact, in the Xian World battlefield, he and Zhanming had fought more than once, and he was also very familiar with his heaven-splitting axe. In all fairness, Zhanming was indeed a very strong opponent. Even now, when he heard that he and Chu Yun had joined forces, but still lost to Yi Shiwen, he did not change his opinion. But at this time, he never expected that the one who suddenly attacked was Zhanming, who he thought had escaped. Ha ha ha, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Yi Shiwen. Even the heavens want to destroy you and cut off your luck. An extremely arrogant roar came from behind the crack, and it was Zhanming himself. Just when everyone thought that he had escaped, no one expected him to come back, and he came back quietly. He had been lurking at the side, waiting for such an opportunity. He had already shed all pretense of cordiality with Yi Shiwen, and how could he not understand the principle of cutting weeds at the roots? He was also very clear that if there was a chance, next time, Yi Shiwen would definitely kill him with his own hands, without the slightest bit of mercy. He could already feel the terrifying threat of Yi Shiwen, so he only had one choice, and that was to take the initiative to gain the upper hand. Only by killing Yi Shiwen first could he avoid the fate of being killed. Originally, he just wanted to see what kind of opportunity there was, but who would have thought that there would always be a way out? Just when he was about to leave, who knew that Yi Shiwen would actually fight with Jun Dingtian, and most importantly, he was seriously injured by Jun Dingtian. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to eradicate this big trouble in one fell swoop. Suddenly, just when everyone thought that Yi Shiwen was doomed, Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes, and an amazing divine light shot out from his eyes and hit the axe directly. In an instant, the axe was blasted away, and then continuously danced in the sky, and finally directly hit the roof of the main hall and directly inserted into the group. And near the crack, everyone could see a pair of big bloody hands trembling. In an instant, Zhang Ming felt that the force of 1,000 pounds had hit his hands and directly ruptured the web between his thumb and index finger, making him unable to hold it, and the axe directly flew out. How is this possible? Behind the crack, Zhang Ming still couldn't believe it at all. So scary, Yi Shiwen was even more terrifying than he had imagined, and 100 times, 1,000 times more terrifying. Isn't he already injured? How can he still be so strong? Could it be that he wasn't injured at all and was purely trying to confuse me so that I would attack? At this time, Zhang Ming's mind was a bit chaotic, and he couldn't believe it. Countless conspiracy possibilities flashed in his mind in an instant, and this was the only way to explain everything in front of him. In his lifetime, he would never know how terrifying Yi Shiwen's recovery ability was. When Zhang Ming fought with him, he didn't really force Yi Shiwen to use his true strength, let alone know about his recovery ability, because it was simply not to that extent. However, no matter how many thoughts flashed in his mind, his reaction was not slow. When he knew that his killing move had failed, he almost didn't stop and directly turned around to escape on the spot, almost without any hesitation. Where do you think you're going? How could Yi Shiwen allow Zhang Ming to escape at this time? He shouted in a cold voice, and a big hand directly grabbed towards the void. The void instantly collapsed and revealed Zhang Ming, who was in the subspace. So, Zhang Ming simply couldn't escape. His big hand was like a huge prison, and it fell across the sky. This was one of the moves of his sky-severing finger, imprisoning the heavens. At this time, he used it in the form of a palm technique, and its power was a notch higher. For the current Yi Shiwen, he had already mastered all kinds of martial arts. In addition, when he had experienced the Ghost Heart Fire Great Array and the martial arts doppelganger, he had made a huge breakthrough in his realm. This had greatly improved his understanding of these martial arts. He had directly disregarded the situation and digested the essence. Zhang Ming only felt that the surrounding space was instantly sealed, as if even the sky could be imprisoned, let alone a mere mortal like him. Bang! He was directly grabbed by Yi Shiwen on the spot, and he constantly struggled, trying to break free from Yi Shiwen's grasp. His body continuously burst forth with astonishing axe radiance, and waves of axe radiance swept out from his body, forming a violent storm, destroying everything in its path. Yi Shiwen only sneered. If it was in the past, perhaps this move of Zhang Ming's might have some effect on him, but now he had a completely new understanding of martial arts. Although he had not broken through to the profound death realm, his combat power had greatly increased compared to before. At this time, in his eyes, Zhang Ming was just like a clown and could not create any waves at all. Boom! After struggling to break free, Zhang Ming despaired, and a ruthless look appeared in his eyes. He actually wanted to self-destruct and perish together with Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen did not give him this opportunity. If an expert at the peak of the profound life realm self-destructed, even he would be affected. Therefore, he simply took the initiative and crushed Zhang Ming first. Chapter 1874. Everything had happened too fast. From Zhang Ming's sudden attack to Yi Shiwen's counterattack, it had happened in the blink of an eye. Everyone hadn't recovered from the shock of Zhang Ming's sudden attack, but they had already seen Yi Shiwen crush him. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but take a deep breath. They could not help but feel a chill down their spine. This was too unreal. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that the person who was crushed in an instant was actually Zhang Ming. Yi Shiwen's fighting prowess had already reached such a high level. With Zhang Ming's strength, it was enough to sweep away an ordinary expert at the initial mastery of the profound life realm. He had even faintly touched the profound death realm. However, he could not even last one move against Yi Shiwen. They were in the same realm, but the gap in strength was actually so big. Was this still the profound life realm? Even an expert at the profound death realm could not be compared to this. Although Yi Shiwen's current strength could not be compared to the profound death realm, in the eyes of the crowd, there was no difference between him and the profound death realm. They were both killed in one move. There was not much difference. Yi Shiwen was already so terrifying. How strong was Jun Dingtian, who had used the 3,000 sword principles? Originally, the crowd did not seem to have a clear understanding. Now it seemed that Jun Dingtian, who had reached such a level, was no longer a match. Have they actually become so strong? Qinlai looked at the few people with a somewhat complicated gaze. He originally thought that he was strong enough, but now it seemed that he was still far from it. Looks like it's time to make a trip back to the Heaven Realm. Yi Shiwen is already so strong, I can't fall behind. Sooner or later, I will return, and we will have a chance to fight again. Qinlai looked at Yi Shiwen and the others with incomparable determination. Thinking of this, his mood suddenly became a lot more relaxed. Yi Shiwen slowly stood up. Since he had already made his move, there was no need to continue waiting. He had already determined that Jun Dingtian would not be able to last long with the 3,000 sword principles. He wanted to see how long Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles could last. Boom! The aura on his body swept out in circles and instantly swept out, forming a huge storm. He also attacked without holding anything back. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's figure disappeared in an instant. He left several light spots in the void and disappeared. Jun Dingtian immediately became vigilant. Yi Shiwen was not like those ordinary experts at the peak of the profound life realm. Whether he admitted it or not, he had to take such a tenacious opponent seriously. But at this time, he was being entangled by Princess Tianqing. Although the demonic aura on her body had been greatly depleted and she had become much more stable, it couldn't be said that her attacks were completely powerless. Even with the 3,000 sword Daos, he could still feel the pressure from her 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Jun Dingtian, I've seen through you. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind him, followed by a loud and piercing sound. A long sword swept over and was about to behead him. His movements were smooth and extremely fast. Many people didn't even have time to react. Whoosh! 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 The 3,000 sword Daos in Jun Dingtian's body were instantly resurrected and automatically protected him. Yi Shiwen's long sword slashed directly on the sword Daos, but it couldn't go any further. At this moment, Jun Dingtian's attack was like a tidal wave, rushing towards Yi Shiwen. It was extremely sharp and fast. His swordsmanship was manifested, condensing into countless sword lights in the void, like meteors falling to the ground, directly blasting towards Yi Shiwen. Dang, dang, dang. Yi Shiwen retreated continuously, constantly stepping on light spots. His figure was constantly flickering, avoiding the sharp attacks. See through me? You're just a mortal. Jun Dingtian sneered, not taking Yi Shiwen's words seriously. Although Yi Shiwen was difficult to deal with, he was just an ant that was difficult to deal with. He could be trampled to death. I'm just a mortal. Yi Shiwen laughed out loud, and the tempest wings behind him spread open again, directly fanning a huge whirlwind, and his figure directly disappeared in this endless tempest and thunderstorm. Don't forget, you're just a mortal now. Yi Shiwen's figure appeared behind him again, directly striking a wave of attacks like quicksilver, directly blocked by Jun Dingtian. Even in the face of Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing's sudden attack, he was still able to firmly defend his territory. In fact, not even a drop of water could enter his territory. In fact, martial arts had become an art in his hands. His sword heart had already reached the divine level. Jun Dingtian snorted coldly. Countless rays of sword radiance rose around him like a tsunami, sweeping in all directions, tearing apart the space nearby. This move covered a large area. No matter where Yi Shiwen hid, even if he hid in the subspace, it would be useless. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen was forced to show his figure, a little embarrassed, but he didn't look the slightest bit depressed. On the contrary, he laughed loudly. I've seen through your 3,000 sword Daos, Yi Shiwen said. With such a huge consumption, you must be at your limit. Let's see how long you can hold on. Jun Dingtian was shocked. He didn't expect Yi Shiwen to see through it. His 3,000 swords doctrine was so powerful that it had boosted his martial power by several times. However, such a powerful technique was not without its shortcomings. The shortcoming was that it consumed too much energy. Even a reincarnated deity like him, who had an incomparably powerful physique refining technique, couldn't support the consumption of his martial power for too long. This could be considered a weakness, and a very big one at that. It was just that he had long forgotten about it after his reincarnation. That was because all the opponents he had encountered since his reincarnation, no matter what kind of geniuses the outside world evaluated them to be, they were all fleeting clouds in front of him. Once he used the 3,000 sword principles, those geniuses were all slaughtered as if they were melons and vegetables. There had never been anyone who could force him to this extent. Even Yi Shiwen was no exception. If it wasn't for Princess Tianqing, even he would have died on the spot. Now, this wasn't a weakness, but Yi Shiwen had suddenly grasped it. Unlike the others, who were just guessing, he was keenly aware of the weakness of his 3,000 sword daos. At this time, it was likely to develop into a fatal flaw. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel annoyed. Could it be that he was going to lose for the first time in history? Let's see if he can hold on until then. Jun Dingtian shouted coldly and took the initiative to attack. His figure directly pulled out a sky full of afterimages, tearing the sound barrier and bursting out with a very sharp, piercing sound. He arrived in front of Yi Shiwen in an instant. This wasn't a spatial shuttle. Instead, he had achieved this by relying on his speed. His agility technique was tyrannical, and his martial power was incomparably high. At this time, it was completely reflected. He spread out his big hand, and an incomparably huge long sword condensed in the void. It rotated unceasingly and issued a crisp and melodious metallic clanging sound. Then, it directly pierced towards Yi Shiwen's head. Dang! At this critical moment, Yi Shiwen's wind and thunder wings directly protected his whole body. His whole body was also hit by a huge force, directly smashing into the ground. Puff! He directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Although his strength had increased a lot, there wasn't much of a difference when facing Jun Dingtian, whose strength had increased by several times. Jun Dingtian immediately grabbed the sword and threw it at Yi Shiwen with all his might. Swoosh! The long sword was fast and urgent, cutting through the vast sky. Everywhere it passed, everything collapsed, and heaven and earth ceased to exist. It seemed like it was going to nail Yi Shiwen to the ground on the spot. Princess Tianqing looked on from the side, suppressing the boiling, demonic energy in her body, and attacked again. She blasted out a punch, and the fist intent turned into an incomparably huge wheel, directly crushing towards Jun Dingtian. Heaven Dao, Human Dao, Azure Dao, Animal Dao, Hungry Ghost Dao, Hell Dao. 6 paths of reincarnation. Each path had the power to destroy heaven and earth and purify all living beings. It was extremely terrifying. Jun Dingtian didn't dare to take it lightly and directly blasted back with his sword. At this time, when the sword was about to hit Yi Shiwen, he managed to dodge it at the critical moment. He managed to avoid getting hit in his vital parts, but even so, half of his body was still blasted into smithereens. He almost died. The battle had reached the most intense stage, and both sides were engaged in a life and death battle. No one dared to hold back. Even Jun Dingtian, who had the upper hand, was no exception. Suddenly, just when everyone thought that Jun Dingtian would continue to attack, Jun Dingtian, who was originally full of momentum, suddenly trembled slightly. The 3,000 sword principles that had swept out in the sky were like the ebbing tide of the sea, pouring into his body. His aura instantly fell completely. Although it was still very powerful, it was no longer the same as before. Everyone immediately reacted. Could it be, as Yi Shiwen said, that Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles had really reached the peak? Cough, cough. Yi Shiwen kept coughing out blood and kept running the Phoenix regeneration technique to repair the half of his body that had been smashed. A victorious smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Sure enough, the biggest weakness of the 3,000 sword principles was time. This wasn't really a weakness, but it still allowed him to persist until now. Chapter 1875. Jun Dingtian's body froze in midair. His 3,000 Swords principal secret technique had finally reached its end, and he had exhausted all of his accumulated power. At this moment, his combat power could be said to have fallen to the bottom. Although it was not that he had no combat power left, in fact, he was even stronger than Princess Tianqing. However, it was quite impossible for him to kill both of them. He did not expect that things would end up like this. It could be said that accidents happened frequently. At this time, he still looked at the flag that was filled with demonic qi, unwilling to give up. However, he was also very clear that Princess Tianqing would not give him the chance to do so. The half of Yi Shiwen's body that had been smashed was also recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seemed that it would not take long for him to return to his peak. When that time came, even he did not have the confidence to fight 2 against 1. However, if he were to give up like this, not only would he not get the flag, but he would also not be able to kill Yi Shiwen. How could he be willing to give up like this? At this moment, Jun Dingtian was in a dilemma. He couldn't move forward, but he couldn't retreat either. However, his dilemma only lasted for a few breaths of time. After all, he was a man of great talent and bold vision. He knew when to make a decision. If he did not make a prompt decision, it was very likely that he would lose his life here. Just like how he had to kill Yi Shiwen to prevent future troubles. Yi Shiwen would not let him go. If there was a chance, he would suddenly kill him and kill him. The situation of mutual appreciation did not occur between the two of them. They only fought each other with blood. There was no personal grudge, only survival, and only Tao. These 2 reasons were enough. He didn't expect that he would be forced to this point. More importantly, he had revealed that he was the reincarnation of God. This news would quickly spread from the mouths of the survivors to the ears of those who were interested. If he wanted to be free and unfettered in the future, it wouldn't be so easy. When that time came, there would be a lot of people who would come to find trouble with him. However, it was useless to think about this at this time. It was not that he did not have a trump card. As the reincarnation of a god, his strength was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Even the endless resources he had were far from what people thought. Swoosh! His entire figure directly turned into a stream of light, tearing the sky apart and directly disappeared in the air. Boom! At this moment, the crowd suddenly became excited. Everyone's emotions were like riding a roller coaster, up and down, up and down, up and down. They originally thought that they were doomed, but they did not expect that there would be a day where they could escape from Jun Dingtian. It was simply incredible. Everyone had already listed Jun Dingtian as one of the people that they could not afford to offend. Most of the people present were experts at the profound life realm. Even they felt the same way. One could imagine how much shock Jun Dingtian had given them this time. It was far beyond their imagination. Everyone finally understood. Through the battle between Yi Shiwen and the battle, Jun Realm, Jun Dingtian and God, Jun Sky, Dingtian, Jun Yi, Jun's Jun, and Dingtian Jun Jun. In peak, they peak Thousand Realm, Jun, the God Jun, and the old Junyi Realm, Jun God the Realm. In any case, it was true that she was at the peak of the profound life realm at such a young age. It was not easy for Yi Shiwen to finally recover to his peak state. However, today's battle with Jun Dingtian had damaged his vitality. He was crippled twice, and the impact was not that simple to forget. However, the harvest from this battle was also quite rich for him. In particular, it pointed out a new path for him, which suddenly broadened his future. In general, the harvest was still greater than the loss, and by a lot. After he recovered to his peak, he immediately grabbed the flag that was full of devil chi with one hand. At this time, the princes of the Dark Country had a somewhat painful expression on their faces. This flag was the national treasure of their Dark Country. Yi Shiwen, this is the national treasure of our Dark Country. It's called the Demon Summoning Flag. According to the hints left by our ancestors, this demon summoning flag should be a divine tool left by the Dark Lord. However, it was damaged in that battle. If it is properly refined, it will still have a lot of power. At this time, Princess Tianqing's voice came into Yi Shiwen's ears. Princess Tianqing's voice was a bit depressed, as if she was suppressing some kind of extreme pain. The tacit understanding that gushed out of her body was endless, and there was still no way to completely digest it. The name Demon Summoning Banner didn't sound extraordinary, but it was refined by the Lord of Darkness as a natal magic tool. Most importantly, compared to the severely damaged Tianyuan mirror, the damage it suffered was much lighter, and it was easier to refine it again. Boom! As soon as Yi Shiwen's big hand patted the flag, the demon summoning flag suddenly erupted with a shocking demon energy. The demon energy was like the sharpest weapon, directly cutting the sky and directly shattering Yi Shiwen's big hand. The power was quite amazing, and it could be seen how powerful the demon summoning flag was in its best state. However, it was already damaged at this time, not to mention that it didn't have a master to control it. Although it wanted to escape, how could it escape from Yi Shiwen's grasp? Shwa! Yi Shiwen's body directly brushed out a bloody light, and the demon summoning flag immediately surrendered as if it had encountered a monarch. Yi Shiwen finally breathed a sigh of relief. If this demon summoning flag continued to resist stubbornly, then it wouldn't be easy for him to subdue it, not to mention that there were so many people in the surroundings who were eyeing it covetously. Finally, by relying on the coercion of Tianyuan Mirror, the demon summoning flag was finally suppressed. Although the demon summoning flag was extraordinary, it couldn't be compared with Tianyuan Mirror, the former demon monarch's divine tool. After subduing the demon summoning flag, Yi Shiwen immediately bid farewell to Qin Lai and the others, and then headed towards the direction of the Ghost Heartfire Array with Princess Tianqing. He was still quite worried at this time, and he didn't know which step Emo had progressed to. Although the ancient god scripture was helping to suppress the demon summoning flag, the spiritual wisdom wouldn't be easy to deal with. Otherwise, Emo wouldn't have been forced to such a state. Everyone saw Yi Shiwen leaving, but they didn't dare to stop him. What a joke. These two were peerless killing gods, and they couldn't afford to provoke them. After discussing for a while, everyone suddenly dispersed and took advantage of this time to quickly search for the treasures in the other treasure vaults. Although the majority of the treasures had been taken by Yi Shiwen, there were still other treasures. In short, they couldn't make this trip in vain. Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing quickly arrived at the edge of the Ghost Heartfire Array. At this time, the physical body of the Lord of Darkness, which was still in the center, was constantly emitting waves of astonishing aura, and was completely suppressed by the Ghost Heartfire Array. However, Yi Shiwen heaved a sigh of relief. He could see that Emo had gained the upper hand. The combination of the demonic aura and the golden light had completely suppressed the deathly aura. More than half of the physical body of the Lord of Darkness had been conquered. In this case, it was only a matter of time before Emo completely conquered the physical body of the Lord of Darkness. Yi Shiwen, you're back? You've actually become a little stronger? Yemo's voice came out. At this time, he had already firmly gained the upper hand, so he still had spare energy to pay attention to Yi Shiwen's matters. However, when he looked at Yi Shiwen, he was immediately surprised. How long had it been? Compared to just now, Yi Shiwen's strength had actually increased by a lot. It was obvious that he had comprehended something. Even though he had been accustomed to Yi Shiwen's valiant cultivation speed, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. But then, something even more surprising happened. He saw Princess Tianqing standing next to Yi Shiwen. The machi on her body traversed the vast sky. She looked like a group of devil shadows from afar, and was very conspicuous. How did this little girl do it? Is she crazy? How can she casually accept such an inheritance? Emo said in surprise. He was an old monster who had cultivated for many years, and his vision was very sharp. He could almost see through Princess Tianqing's cultivation at a glance. Although Yi Shiwen had already guessed it, this was the first time he had confirmed it. This was a tacit understanding between him and Princess Tianqing. If he didn't ask, Princess Tianqing wouldn't say. Everyone had their own secrets. He didn't have to know, and he also didn't have to ask. Senior, you really have good eyesight. Princess Tianqing's delicate face revealed a somewhat painful expression. Forcibly accepting the inheritance like this had made her cultivation soar, but at the same time, she had to bear a very big risk. If she couldn't digest this power in time, then this power would become a time bomb that could explode in her body at any time. However, she had no other choice. She had no other choice. Yi Shiwen immediately told Yimo about his encounter with Jun Dingtian. Yimo went silent for a moment, and then he said, I didn't want to interfere in the affairs of others. But since you've saved this kid once, then I'll lend you a hand. I have a technique here that can allow you to swiftly digest this energy. But it's also slightly risky, so it's up to you to make your choice. Chapter 1876. Yimo's tone was relaxed, but there was also a bit of indifference in it. Yes, for him, apart from the matters related to Yi Shiwen, there was no relationship between him and Yi Shiwen. In fact, it wasn't even qualified to attract his attention. Princess Tianqing's face revealed a pained expression. The terrifying demonic aura was churning in her muscles, tearing them apart. It seemed as if her body was in danger of collapsing at any moment. She had no other choice. Choosing to accept this inheritance at this time was already a risky move. She wouldn't have taken such a risk if she hadn't been ambitious. She bit her lower lip. Not everyone was born extraordinary, as there would always be people in the world who were more monstrous than you. Not everyone was as lucky as Yi Shiwen. Even if Yi Shiwen had obtained the mysterious space, it was hard to tell how many times he had struggled to get to where he was today. How could he have reached his current status without a bit of ruthlessness? Moreover, Princess Tianqing was a very ambitious person. She was willing to risk it all. She had already done it once, so why not do it again? Please enlighten me, Senior. Princess Tianqing cupped her hands and said. She could tell from Yi Shiwen's attitude that this unknown spirit body wasn't an ordinary person either. She knew very well what kind of person Yi Shiwen was. On the surface, he seemed gentle and amiable, but in reality, he was a lawless person. Didn't he see how the people of the Divine Union killed without batting an eyelid? The people of the Divine Union had become more and more arrogant in recent years. Even the other great sects wouldn't dare provoke them if it wasn't necessary. It wasn't that they couldn't afford to provoke them, but it wasn't worth it. Other people simply wouldn't dare provoke the people of the Divine Union. Even with her hidden power, she wouldn't dare provoke the people of the Divine Union. However, Yi Shiwen was unscrupulous. Was it because he was ignorant? No, in her opinion, it wasn't because he was ignorant, but because he was fearless. A man should overcome all obstacles. There was a fundamental difference between this and being reckless and ignorant. Being reckless and ignorant was due to ignorance, while being courageous was due to having a big heart. It was conceivable that the spiritual body was no ordinary being. She had no other choice since she had come this far. The battle with Jun Dingtian had worsened her injuries and put her in a precarious situation. Just as she finished her sentence, a martial arts current flew out of the physical body of the Lord of Darkness and entered his body. Although this secret technique is a little dangerous, it is still a supreme secret technique. If you don't die today, you will be able to achieve great things with this technique. Yimo said coldly. Thank you, Senior. Princess Tianqing hurriedly expressed her gratitude and went to the side to carefully comprehend it. Yi Shiwen stepped forward and told Yimo about the martial arts incarnation that he had comprehended during the fight with Jun Dingtian. Yimo was silent for a moment, and then he said, This is also my fault. But I didn't want to tell you so early, because although this secret technique isn't complicated, not everyone can cultivate it successfully. It belongs to the divine martial path, and once it's cultivated successfully, it's a matter of course that your strength will increase greatly. I didn't expect Jun Dingtian's origin to be the reincarnation of a deity. No wonder he knows this secret technique. Yimo said, I originally wanted to wait until you cultivated to the peak of the profound death realm and was about to prove your Tao. With the strength of the martial arts incarnation, it would be more convenient for you to prove your Tao. Before that, I didn't want you to create doppelgangers because of this matter, because condensing the martial arts incarnation would greatly slow down your progress. In particular, the more powerful the magical secret technique, the more time it takes to cultivate it. I originally wanted you to cultivate bravely and diligently without being disturbed by external things. Now it seems that I took it for granted. If you don't know the martial arts incarnation, you will inevitably be at a disadvantage when you meet such an opponent in the future. Although martial arts incarnation is still rare, once it appears, you will suffer a great loss just like this time. If it wasn't for this girl, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to escape from this calamity. Now, I'll teach you a martial arts incarnation cultivation method called myriad embodiment. It's not a cultivation method of the demon race, nor was it created by the demon king. However, it came from an extremely powerful expert who was later defeated by the demon king. In the end, this martial arts incarnation fell into the hands of the demon king. However, when one's cultivation reached the level of the demon king, his body was like a heaven and earth. He could already transform his body into a world and could contain endless skills. For him, this method was no longer useful. Therefore, this method was buried in the end. Myriad embodiment. Yishuan read out these 4 names. There's also a reason for this. The so-called martial arts incarnation is to entrust one's own skills to the martial arts, and then separate them to form a new martial arts incarnation. It's a bit similar to the practice of external incarnation, but it's different from external incarnation. The martial arts incarnation is entrusted to one's own martial arts, and can completely integrate with one's own martial arts at a critical time. Then, one can erupt with very tyrannical strength. Yemo continued. After one's cultivation reaches a high level, one must practice this method because many people can't advance by leaps and bounds like they did in the early stages of cultivation. It's very likely that they won't make any progress for tens of thousands of years. In this case, the only thing they can do is to constantly purify their skills and deepen them day by day. However, they won't be able to produce any essential changes. And the martial arts incarnation method is to a large extent the research of those who couldn't make a breakthrough. Generally speaking, the martial arts incarnation can store completely different skills, ranging from 1 to 9 times. The more the martial arts incarnation, the rarer it is. Even many deities who practice martial arts incarnation can only increase their strength by 5 or 6 times. It's very rare to see martial arts incarnation more than 7 times. But the martial arts incarnation I'm going to teach you can accumulate 9 times the strength of martial arts incarnation. It can be said to be a top-notch martial arts incarnation method. Yemo said, if this method were to be spread, even deities would try to snatch it, because the martial arts incarnation method itself is created for deities. The martial arts incarnation method you mentioned before doesn't exist for deities. Deities can shake the world with just a raise of their hands or feet. This kind of consumption can be completely recovered in a few breaths. Not to mention, they can condense a divine kingdom in their body, forming a world of their own. So, they can replenish a huge amount of power at any time. This weakness is meaningless for such immortal powerhouses. So, do you understand? Yemo said. Yishuan nodded. Even with all these flaws, the martial arts incarnation method was still an earth-shattering creation. With his current strength, it could be said to be invincible at the peak of the profound life realm. If it wasn't for Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles, he was absolutely confident that he could fight with Jun Dingtian. He couldn't imagine how terrifying it would be if his strength skyrocketed by 9 times in an instant. This was definitely an earth-shattering method. But you also have to know that it's very difficult to condense martial arts incarnation. You should be very clear about how you got your strength. It can be said that you've gone through a lot of hardships. But even so, you still need to condense a martial arts incarnation that is similar to your strength. You can imagine how difficult it is. Moreover, it's even more difficult to condense it to 9 times. I originally didn't want you to learn this martial arts incarnation so early. This will only slow down your progress. Yemo sighed and said. There were many things that he had calculated clearly, but as the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. Many things couldn't be accomplished just by sitting at home and making plans. Yishuan knew that Yemo had said that it would be difficult, but in fact, he had already cultivated to this level. So, the difficulty of retraining his martial power was naturally much lower than before. Although it wasn't as difficult as eating and drinking, but it was still a lot easier. Although this body incarnation is good, it can't be used for a while. Moreover, I'm about to set off to the tomb of the Lord of Dead Spirits, and it's very likely that I'll have to face Jun Dingtan. Yi Shiwen frowned. This made him quite fearful. Moreover, there was still the female opponent that even Jun Dingtian was extremely fearful of. Even he wasn't very sure how strong she was. This is a very big problem. Although I've suppressed the spiritual wisdom, I'm still trapped here, and I can't leave in a short period of time. This is the most troublesome thing. Yimo was also quite vexed. Since you want to achieve the effect of rapid growth in a short period of time, the only way is to take a risk. Although the great art of disintegration that I imparted to the girl just now is a bit dangerous, it's also a way to go. You can kill more powerful beasts and refine them. Even if only a small part of their martial arts is refined by you, there's still a way to condense a martial arts incarnation in a short period of time. If you can make it in time, that's the only way. Yishuan nodded. Even Princess Tianqing had such ambition and boldness. Why couldn't he take a little risk? The inheritance of the Lord of Dead Spirits was related to his future fight against the Abyss Devil Lord. He absolutely couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Thinking of this, there was nothing for him to hesitate about. All right, I'll impart this great art of disintegration to you, Yimo said immediately. Then, a martial arts torrent flew out and directly instilled into Yi Shiwen's body. In this martial arts torrent, there were two peerless techniques. One was the technique of the body incarnation, and the other was the great art of disintegration. Yi Shiwen quickly looked at it. Chapter 1877. Yi Shiwen finally understood what Yimo had meant when he saw the mnemonic chant and the various information contained in the Hua Gong Great Law. Yimo had said that there was a bit of danger in this technique. He immediately had the urge to curse out loud. Is this a little dangerous? Yi Shiwen could see through the essence of many power techniques with just a glance at his current martial arts realm. It was simply impossible to hide from him. He immediately understood the various tricks of this Hua Gong Great Technique with just a glance. This kind of Hua Gong Great Technique absorbed the martial power of others and then transformed it into one's own martial power. Then, it would be transformed into one's own martial power. However, the most evil aspect of this technique was that the absorption effect would be quite limited if the opponent's martial power was far inferior to one's own. In fact, the absorption effect would be quite limited if the opponent's martial power was comparable to one's own. Moreover, the success rate was very high. Even someone as bold as Yi Shiwen couldn't help but suck in a mouthful of cold air when he saw the Hua Gong Great Technique. Practicing this technique was like gambling with one's life. He looked at the Myriad Incarnations technique again. This technique was very complete. The essence of each technique was very precise. He had learned it almost at a glance. He didn't need the Mysterious Spaces guidance at all. He used to rely on the Mysterious Spaces guidance. In fact, it could even be said that he was dependent on it. Yi Shiwen was like a primary school student at that time, but he had to solve middle school and high school students' questions. He hadn't learned the knowledge of middle school and high school students. So, he could only use the mysterious space to find the correct answer. He didn't know the principle behind it. However, he could use it freely. But now, hundreds of years had passed in the blink of an eye. He was no longer the same as he had been when he had just stepped into the martial arts world. His martial arts knowledge and realm couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. These methods were exceptionally exquisite. In fact, many of them made Yi Shiwen feel like slapping the table and exclaiming in admiration. However, he didn't need the mysterious space since he had such a detailed cultivation process. This was completely different from when he was trying to figure out the Sky Emperor Divine Fist, which he had no information about at all. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that this technique of myriad body transfiguration was very brilliant. However, it was different from a doppelganger or a second primordial spirit because it didn't have a physical body to rely on. Therefore, it couldn't be like Yi Shiwen's previous Star Beast avatar that could cultivate on its own and entrust its primordial spirit to it. However, a martial arts incarnation also had something that a clone or a second primordial spirit couldn't compare with. It was because it was entrusted to the martial arts. Therefore, it could be completely accommodated into one's body at a critical moment, and its power would skyrocket all of a sudden. If his cultivation were to double, then the increase in his combat strength would not be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It was very likely that his combat strength would increase by 4 or 5 times. This was the reason why Jun Dingtian's martial power had only increased by a few times, but his combat power was still terrifying to Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen had to cultivate on his own in order to condense the martial arts. It would take a long time to accumulate, unless he could prove his Dao one day. Otherwise, this martial arts incarnation could only be used as a secret technique and couldn't be used frequently. Every time a martial arts incarnation was condensed, it would double the martial arts. Although it was much easier to condense again after exhausting it, it still took a lot of time. Otherwise, Jun Dingtian wouldn't have let Yi Shiwen and Princess Tianqing go so easily. Moreover, to condense a martial arts incarnation, one would need to separate one's own martial arts. The more powerful the martial arts, the more powerful the martial arts incarnation that could be entrusted. To say that it was double or triple was actually an ideal state. Many people who cultivated martial arts incarnation couldn't achieve such an ideal state at all. In fact, it was already very difficult for an ordinary person to cultivate a martial arts incarnation that could double the martial arts incarnation's power by 50%. This had something to do with the martial arts one had chosen to entrust. Jun Dingtian's 3,000 sword principles were so tyrannical mainly because they were very powerful. It was naturally extraordinary to be entrusted with all of one's martial arts. These were all things that needed to be thought about in detail. In short, it was originally something that needed to be carefully crafted and planned slowly. Now, it was naturally not that easy to achieve in a short time. Using the great art of dispelling to speed things up was a risky move in itself. At this time, Yi Shiwen turned his head to look at Princess Tianqing, who was sitting cross-legged and using the great art of dispelling to refine the soaring demon energy on her body. He saw that the muscles on her body had ruptured in an instant, and blood was spurting out. It looked extremely hideous. However, she was digesting the martial arts bit by bit. Soon, he realized that something was wrong. Princess Tianqing's martial arts were almost no weaker than his. Although it was because of the unknown inheritance, in fact, this was almost the limit. Even Yi Shiwen didn't have any hope of advancing further in the profound life realm, let alone her. Then how was she going to absorb all this martial arts? And at this moment, he saw a faint demonic aura emitting from Princess Tianqing's body, condensing into a huge 6 paths of reincarnation. Boundless fist intent spread out, and endless power surged towards the wheel of the 6 paths of reincarnation. This girl is actually also condensing martial arts incarnation. From the looks of it, her technique is quite brilliant. This is the technique of the Azura clan. If that's the case, then it's not surprising. The Azura clan also had a demon king in the past, and could be said to be glorious for a time. It's not surprising that the clan has such a technique. Yimo said, Yi Shiwen, although this martial arts incarnation is not a technique that everyone can learn, there are too many clans, families, and sects in this world that are glorious now, or in the past. They have passed down many earth-shattering techniques. If you underestimate the people of this world because of this, then you're not far from disaster. Although this technique is a top-notch technique for condensing martial arts incarnation, in reality, unless you can condense 9 incarnations, it's not much of an advantage compared to other techniques. Moreover, as your cultivation increases, the martial arts of your martial arts incarnation will also need to be condensed again. It can be said to be very complicated. I understand. Yi Shiwen understood what Yi Mo meant. The 9-fold martial arts incarnation might seem powerful, but the premise was that he had to condense 9 incarnations. Moreover, every time his cultivation increased, he would need to condense the martial arts incarnation again. This required a huge amount of spiritual energy and martial arts. It was really not something that a poor person could afford. It was completely a technique that belonged to the tall, rich, and handsome. As for the demon summoning banner that you brought back, I just used my divine thoughts to probe it. Leave it for me. With the demon summoning banner, when I refine the demon summoning banner, I won't be considered an outsider compared to this spiritual intelligence. On the contrary, I can use the demon summoning banner to forcefully devour this spiritual intelligence. When that happens, I can quickly come out to help you. Just with this physical body, I can defeat countless experts. Yemo continued. Yi Shiwen did not hesitate and directly handed the demon summoning banner to Yemo. The demon summoning banner was useless in his hands for the time being. Moreover, it was obvious that the demon summoning banner itself was the natal celestial device of the Lord of Darkness. If Yemo took over the physical body of the Lord of Darkness, the demon summoning banner would be able to exert its greatest power in his hands. Moreover, there was no distinction between him and Yemo. There were no taboos between them. All right, I won't say much. Hurry up and go to the tomb of the Lord of Dead Spirits to search for the inheritance of the Lord of Dead Spirits. That is our main objective this time. We must not let anyone get there before us. As for me, you can rest assured. With the Ghost Heartflame formation, even a profound Death Realm expert would not be able to do anything to me, said Yemo. Right now, Yi Shiwen was most worried about Yemo. Since Yemo was fine, he did not have to worry anymore. Yi Shiwen got up and glanced at Princess Tianqing, who was still in seclusion. Her body was constantly being torn apart and recovering. After a period of time, he would also be in the same situation. There were no surprises. His figure flashed, and he was already out of the Ghost Heartfire array. At this time, the entire hall was already empty. Who would dare to stay in this hall with the existence of such a big, evil star like Yi Shiwen? Wouldn't that be courting death? The wealth in the other halls had also been plundered clean by those people. Yi Shiwen hadn't gotten a single thing. However, he didn't care about it. After all, he had made a huge harvest this time. So, these worldly possessions were nothing compared to his harvest. With another sway of his mind, he had already exited the treasury of the Lord of Darkness and returned to the abyss of dead spirits. The situation was different from the treasury of the Lord of Darkness, where the dark aura was denser. Outside, there was more deathly aura and the power of death mixed together, eroding everyone's spirit. Yi Shiwen released the aura from his body. A golden airwave swept out. The deathly aura and the power of death's laws could not get close to him at all. They were all blocked. At the same time, his entire body was like a bright lamp in the darkness. Immediately, he attracted the attention of many tyrannical and ferocious beings' divine senses. All of them swept towards Yi Shiwen's body. He immediately sensed them the moment they swept towards him. A sneer involuntarily flashed across the corner of his mouth. It just so happened that he was in need of an endless amount of cultivation power. In the eyes of others, those undying ferocious creatures were terrifying monsters. But in his eyes, it was just the cultivation power that he needed to condense a martial arts incarnation, a cultivation power that could run and jump. However, he still had to be careful not to attract the attention of the profound Death Realm's undying monsters. Otherwise, he could only flee. Boom! Suddenly, the void within a radius of hundreds of miles suddenly collapsed on the spot. A huge demonic claw directly reached out. Chapter 1878. This was a skinny death claw. It did not have much flesh and blood. Only some flesh and densely packed nerves were attached to the eerie white bones. It looked ferocious and frightening. The power of death immediately spread out the moment it attacked. It was like a claw that could destroy the heavens. It directly smashed downwards. This attack could be said to be earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Yi Shiwen could immediately tell that this was a dead creature at the peak of the profound life realm. In order to attract these ferocious dead creatures, he deliberately suppressed his own strength when he released his aura. This made him look no different from an ordinary martial artist at the peak of the profound life realm. As expected, he immediately attracted a ferocious creature at the peak of the profound life realm. However, Even so, the density of the tyrannical, ferocious dead creatures in the undead abyss still made his hair stand on end, and he trembled with fear. He had just revealed his aura, and he had already been targeted. Moreover, this was at its weakest. When the ferocious dead creatures in the undead abyss returned, how grand would the situation be? From this, it could be deduced how frightening the undead lord was at his peak. With such an army, it was enough to sweep through a world and dominate the world. If he could obtain the inheritance of the undead lord, he would have the confidence to face the abyss demon lord. Yi Shiwen immediately raised his hand and blocked. Clang! There was a loud bang, and the sound of gold and iron colliding was heard. Sparks flew in all directions. At this time, Yi Shiwen's counterattack arrived in the blink of an eye. Along the claw, he directly grabbed a golden long sword. The tip of the sword suddenly pointed towards the void, and suddenly picked out a huge crack, picked out a subspace passage. And at the end of the passage, an incomparably huge skeleton appeared in front of him. This was actually a bone demon. Moreover, it was a terrifying bone demon at the peak of the profound life realm. Human die. This bone demon had already developed spiritual wisdom. At this time, its hiding place was directly exposed by Yi Shiwen's sword, so it was somewhat ashamed and annoyed. In its hollow eyes, there was a gloomy, ghostly fire burning unceasingly, incomparably greedy. It had an incomparable desire for Yi Shiwen's body. For it, the only way to prove its Tao was to continuously devour a large amount of flesh and blood, and then regenerate flesh and blood on the surface of its body. When the flesh and blood completely regenerated on the surface of its body, it would naturally prove its Tao. At that time, it would be another bone demon god, and it would be even more powerful than other gods. It had already gradually regrown some flesh, and its cultivation was also approaching the peak of the profound life realm. It could feel the vigorous vitality in Yi Shiwen's body. If it could devour, then it would definitely be able to grow a large chunk of flesh, and its cultivation would improve even more. If it devoured, it could even break through the peak of the profound life realm, a giant of the profound death stage. Even in a place like the Dead Spirit Abyss, where ferocious creatures roamed the streets, a giant of the profound death stage would still be a giant. Their status was incomparable to that of the profound life stage. You're courting death. Greed has blinded your eyes. Time to die. Yi Shiwen shouted. His movements were extremely fast. His physical body had long been tyrannical to the point that ordinary people could not understand. On the spot, he directly took a step forward. The long sword in his hand directly emitted a shocking sword radiance. It directly pierced towards the bone demon in the depths of the void, at the end of the subspace passageway. However, the bone demon directly formed a claw in the void. It became bigger and bigger, and then formed a white bone cage, grabbing towards Yi Shiwen. Clang! There was a loud roar. Without any suspense, the white bone cage was completely cut apart by Yi Shiwen. The seemingly indestructible bones could not even withstand a single blow from Yi Shiwen's sword radiance. It was directly cut apart on the spot and forcibly dispersed. Roar! The bone demon screamed in pain and continuously retreated. In its hollow eyes, there was a dark, ghostly fire constantly flickering, representing its intelligence. At this moment, it seemed that it had somewhat discovered that the person in front of it was not to be trifled with. He was like an iron plate, and it seemed to have kicked an iron plate. Thinking of leaving now, isn't it too late? Yi Shiwen sneered. His figure directly disappeared in the void, and then only a sharp whistling sound could be heard. Immediately after, his figure reappeared and was already above the bone demon. The sword radiance flickered again, and the clanging sound continued. However, at this moment, the bone demon could only see that at this moment, there was a special substance condensing in the entire heaven and earth. In an instant, all the bones condensed, and then instantly formed a long forest of bones. Then, it crazily grew and pierced towards Yi Shiwen. Although they were only bones, but they were able to instantly pierce through the sky like a hornet's nest, and even the space was pierced. One could imagine how terrifying it was. Yi Shiwen's entire body constantly shuttled through the forest of bones. Under his body, there were constantly new forests of bones, and they constantly pierced towards Yi Shiwen, trying to stop Yi Shiwen's sneak attack. If one looked from afar, they would only be able to see a dazzling golden light tearing through the sky, and behind this golden light, countless forests of bones directly grew and instantly covered the entire heaven and earth. However, each time, there was no way to pierce through the golden light, and each time, it was only a little bit, but it was like a natural moat. Yi Shiwen's speed was extremely fast, and in just a moment, he had already killed his way to the front of the bone demon. "It's over." Yi Shiwen's face was expressionless, and he coldly said. Although this bone demon was already very powerful, and was not considered weak among the peak profound life realm experts, it could only be said that it was unlucky to encounter Yi Shiwen. Boom! The sword light in the sky grew bigger and bigger, and very soon, it directly formed a torrent of energy and fiercely bombarded the body of the bone demon. On the spot, the bone demon's body, which was comparable to metal and stone, was completely smashed into pieces in an instant. After that, Yi Shiwen spread out his big hand, and an incomparably huge whirlpool appeared on his palm. Endless death energy and the power of death, as well as the martial power emitted by the bone demon, were completely absorbed by him in one breath. Although this bone demon was far inferior to Yi Shiwen, it was, after all, a terrifying existence at the peak of profound life realm, and its martial power could also be said to be terrifying. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that an incomparably powerful force had poured into his body in a split second, and his meridians had almost burst open. If it was not for the fact that his tyrant body had already been cultivated to the step of strengthening the meridians, just this martial power alone would have completely burst him. From the outside, in an instant, his entire body looked red, and countless capillaries were forcefully burst by this martial power. He looked like a person of blood, and his expression was incomparably ferocious. He continuously operated the great art of transformation, and unceasingly condensed his martial power. The martial power absorbed from the bone demon was slowly transformed into the purest martial power, which was approximately equivalent to about 1/20th of his own martial power. In other words, he still had to kill 19 bone demons, which were at the peak of profound life realm, to be able to condense the first martial arts incarnation. One could imagine how difficult it was to cultivate this martial arts incarnation. Because this was the first time he condensed, the degree of difficulty was also the highest. In the future, it would be much easier to condense the same martial arts incarnation. If he did not condense the martial arts incarnation, then his martial power would eventually disappear in his body bit by bit, because his body would not be able to store it. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally began to operate the martial arts of the body into myriad transformations, and a martial art was gradually separated from his body. Behind him, endless starlight was incomparably brilliant and instantly spread out, forming a vast universe. It looked incomparably vast, and Yi Shiwen was this universe, the only true God, and the only ruler of this universe. This process was incomparably painful, as if a person's arm was being chopped off. This was forcibly tearing out a part of his martial arts, and then condensing it again. This was his martial arts, and his cultivation in the martial arts could also be said to be a generation's grandmaster. Although it was not comparable to Jun Dingtian's cultivation in the sword arts, it was much more powerful than many of his peers who specialized in the martial arts for their entire lives. This was the Shattered Star Fist of his martial arts. The Shattered Star Fist was constantly improved in his hands, becoming more and more powerful. Even now, it was still a very powerful martial arts in his hands, becoming more and more powerful. Compared to the original, it was already beyond recognition, as if it had been reborn. Even if the creator of the Shattered Star Fist were to see it, he would have to concede defeat. After all, the realm was already completely different. He wanted to entrust his first martial arts incarnation to the Shattered Star Fist, and in the future, he would also condense other martial arts. He was different from Jun Dingtian. Jun Dingtian had refined 3,000 sword principles, which seemed very powerful, and even had broad prospects for the future. If each of the 3,000 sword principles could be cultivated to the extreme, perhaps there would be a day when one could prove one's way with strength. However, that was too far away and too scattered. Even if he condensed 3,000 sword principles, it would only increase his combat power by a few times. For Yi Shiwen, who was eager to condense the first martial arts incarnation and increase his combat power, this was not desirable. Moreover, everyone had their own path, and they were all different. After a long time, a figure with the sky full of starlight slowly condensed behind him. Although it was only an embryonic form, it carried unparalleled power. Yi Shiwen knew that his first martial arts incarnation was preliminarily formed, and the next step was to continuously refine it. With the formation of this martial arts incarnation, he did not stop and directly flew in the direction of the tomb of the Lord of Dead Spirits, which he knew. Chapter 1879. Yi Shiwen headed towards the tomb of the Undead Spirit Lord at an extremely fast speed. He had basically appeared thousands of miles away in a flash. Although he didn't choose to look for the tomb of the Undead Spirit Lord immediately, it didn't mean that he didn't care about it. In fact, he had thought about it clearly before he made his choice. The tomb of the Undead Spirit Lord was the main purpose of the major forces. Everything would be worth it if they could obtain the inheritance of the Undead Spirit Lord. If he obtained the inheritance of the Undead Spirit Lord, the entire undead abyss would be in his hands. What kind of fortuitous encounter or treasure could be compared to this? However, after thinking about it, he decided to seize the demon summoning flag first. The inheritance of the Lord of the Undead Spirits would definitely be the focus of countless pairs of eyes. There were many powerful experts searching for it, and there were also many powerful experts gathering there. Although Yi Shiwen was conceited, he wouldn't have an easy time if he encountered those old monsters who had cultivated for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. At most, he would only be one of those old monsters. It wouldn't be easy for him to kill his way out of the encirclement of those experts. He even thought about the consequences if he lost the inheritance of the Undead Spirit Lord. Therefore, he decided to snatch the demon summoning flag first after thinking about it for a long time. Now that he had snatched the devil beckoning banner, his strength had greatly increased, and he was about to reach the peak. Moreover, he was about to condense his first martial arts incarnation. If he were to erupt, his battle prowess would double. At that time, his battle prowess would undergo earth-shattering changes. Yi Shiwen was confident that he could compete with those old monsters who had cultivated for many years and kill his way out of them. This was Yi Shiwen's true confidence and foundation after condensing his first martial arts incarnation. With this martial arts incarnation, Yi Shiwen could advance and retreat freely. Even if he encountered Jun Dingtian, he would dare to compete with him. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel anxious. After all, he didn't know if the inheritance of the Lord of Undead Spirits would belong to anyone. He wasn't like those major powers who could split their forces into two groups and take them all. To him, this was the only choice he had. He could only start with the easy part. Now, he had to rush over as fast as possible. However, it seemed like the inheritance of the Undead Spirit Lord had yet to begin. Otherwise, Chu Yun, Zhang Ming, and the others wouldn't be able to compete with Yi Shiwen so easily. They were the people who had been selected by the major forces to inherit the Undead Spirit Lord's inheritance. Of course, the prerequisite was that they could obtain the Undead Spirit Lord's inheritance. Therefore, if he rushed over now, he should still be able to make it. But even so, he couldn't guarantee that he would miss anything, so he had to speed up. The inheritance of the Lord of the Undead was located in the deepest part of the Undead Abyss. In the deepest part of the Abyss of the Dead Souls, there was an incomparably huge plain that stretched across the entire Abyss of the Dead Souls. In fact, if the Abyss of the Dead Souls was an incomparably huge abyss, then this plain was actually the bottom of the Abyss of the Dead Souls, which was also the deepest part. There were many powerful ferocious beasts residing there, and there were even quite a few profound Death Realm ferocious beasts. These ferocious beasts usually divided up the entire plane of the abyss of the dead souls. If it wasn't for the undead tide that forced most of them out, they wouldn't even dare to approach such a dangerous place. Even so, the remaining ferocious beasts were enough to tear the invaders into pieces. It was still extremely dangerous. However, everyone had no other choice because they had no other choice. This might be their only chance of success. Apart from the profound death realm ferocious beasts, there were many heavenly beings and even profound life realm ferocious beasts living on this incomparably huge plane. They formed groups of 3 to 5 and roared. To others, this might be an extremely huge threat. However, to Yi Shiwen, it was the best opportunity. Even if there weren't any peak profound life realm ferocious beasts attacking him, the power that these ferocious beasts could convert was far inferior to that of a peak profound life realm white-bone demon. However, it was still better than nothing for him. When the number of ferocious beasts accumulated to a certain extent, it would also cause a qualitative change. To Yi Shiwen, who was currently in the process of condensing his first martial arts incarnation, even the most insignificant power was absolutely not something he could let go of. Just like that, he slaughtered his way towards the abyss of the dead souls. His speed was extremely fast as he continuously shuttled back and forth. Suddenly, when he was about to reach the periphery of the plane of the dead souls, he saw endless dark clouds of death covering everything in the distance. It was as if everything in the sky and on the ground had been completely covered. Those aren't dark clouds. Yi Shiwen immediately opened his heaven's eye. Only then did he discover that those were not dark clouds of death at all. They were clearly an army of death formed by countless ferocious beasts. At this moment, these ferocious beasts had all gathered together and did not leave. It was as if they were besieging something. Yi Shiwen opened his heaven's eye and looked inside, only to see that they were besieging a group of people. Yi Shiwen took a look and saw that these ferocious beasts were besieging a person. Who else could it be other than Qin Lai? Qin Lai and the others, who had set off earlier than him, were now actually being besieged. Even though the individual strength of these countless ferocious beasts was not too high, they were still able to trap Qin Lai and the others, completely trapping them within. There was no end to them. No end to them. Furthermore, there was no lack of profound life realm experts among them. Faced with such a mixed group, even profound death realm experts would feel their hearts go numb. This was the most frightening aspect of the endless army of the dead. There was simply no end to them. Even with Qin Lai's cultivation, he was still trapped within. Furthermore, Qin Lai seemed to have gained a lot from the battle with Jun Dingtian. He had actually directly stepped into the peak of the profound life realm in one go. Furthermore, his cultivation was extremely stable. It did not seem like he had just stepped into the peak of the profound life realm. This made Yi Shiwen somewhat sigh with emotion. These geniuses were indeed extraordinary characters. No wonder Princess Tianqing had said that these geniuses couldn't be calculated with common sense. Perhaps they would suddenly have an inspiration and soar to the top in one go. Yi Shiwen, with their talent and the endless wealth of their sex, the speed at which they rose was naturally incomparably fast. Furthermore, the martial sect had an immortal inheritance of a sovereign realm expert. What kind of person was a sovereign realm expert? Just the inheritance that Yi Shiwen had obtained from Yi Mo had allowed him to walk all the way to where he was today. Furthermore, this sovereign realm expert had left behind a complete inheritance. Naturally, he could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. Moreover, Yi Shiwen had also heard many rumors about the martial sect during this period of time. It was different from the other emperors who were confirmed to have fallen or passed away in meditation. It was said that the founder of the martial sect had gone to a distant space-time. There hadn't been any news of him for many years. However, he still had a formidable deterrent force until he received the definite news of his death. Furthermore, in the eyes of many, Emperor Qin was the most outstanding person in the modern era. He was also the only great existence who had proven his Tao and become an emperor in the modern era. How could such a person die so easily? Therefore, the martial sect was still the most fearsome immortal inheritance. In the Xian world, They had yet to spread their tentacles. However, the martial sect was still very famous in the myriad heavens. Yi Shiwen's gaze swept over. These dead spirits could be said to have advanced and retreated in a well-controlled manner. It was as if they were marching in a formation. Although these dead spirits were not weak, most of them did not have any spiritual wisdom. It was impossible for them to be so well organized. It was very obvious that there was a powerful existence commanding them from behind. His gaze swept across the area. Indeed, it was as he had expected. In the depths of these dead spirits and ferocious creatures, there were a few dead spirits at the peak of the profound life stage high up in the air. They were commanding these dead spirits and ferocious creatures to launch wave after wave of attacks towards the martial organization's group. These dead spirits at the peak of the profound life realm firmly occupied positions in all four directions. They were commanding them calmly. They were like great generals among the humans. Their cultivation was tyrannical, and they knew how to use troops. Every time the martial sect's group wanted to rush out, they would be blocked by these dead spirits. Even if Qin Lai personally organized a surprise attack, he would still be beaten back by these dead spirits. Yi Shiwen immediately understood why Qin Lai was actually not a match for them despite his cultivation. These dead spirits at the peak of the profound life realm were not inferior to Qin Lai. If he wanted to break out of the encirclement alone, he could. However, the martial sect's people behind him would definitely be annihilated here. Young master, you can break out by yourself. Don't worry about us. Seeing that the encirclement was getting smaller and smaller, they were also getting closer and closer. They were about to be completely annihilated. These people had no choice but to grit their teeth and be ruthless. This time, those who had followed Qin Lai were the experts of their faction and the martial sect. There were also some outer sect elders who had pledged their allegiance to Qin Lai in advance. It could be said that they were the backbone of Qin Lai's faction. If they were completely annihilated here, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for the faction that supported Qin Lai. That's absolutely impossible. Our Qin clan has never abandoned our companions and fled first. You definitely can't start with me. Qin Lai roared and gritted his teeth. At most, I will use it. I will definitely bring all of you out of here. He had already used all his strength. He continuously blasted out fist shadows that filled the sky, drawing out an ancient world that ate raw meat and drank blood. He crushed the dead spirits that were pouncing towards him. However, there were too many of these dead spirits. They were simply endless. Even with his cultivation, he felt powerless. Chapter 1880. He continued to crush all the dead spirits and ferocious creatures that pounced on him. However, the gap was quickly filled by even more dead spirits and ferocious creatures. They were densely packed in all directions. If not for the fact that everyone had opened up their domains to resist, these dead spirits and ferocious creatures would have already pounced on them. Boom! 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 Suddenly, a huge roar could be heard coming from afar. It seemed that a fierce battle had broken out in the army of dead spirits and ferocious creatures. What's going on? Qin Lai hurriedly stopped and looked up. He saw a golden light tearing a huge crack in the endless sea of undead and ferocious creatures. This huge crack was still expanding, and wherever it passed, it would devour the undead and ferocious creatures. As long as these dead spirits and ferocious creatures touched this golden light, they would be crushed to pieces on the spot. Then, they would be devoured by the golden light. He could not see the inside of the golden light at all. He could only vaguely see a human figure. Although he could not see the figure clearly, this figure was too familiar to him. Who else could this golden light be other than Yi Shiwen? He was immediately surprised and happy. He knew Yi Shiwen's combat power very well. With Yi Shiwen joining them, there was no doubt that they would have another strong support. He was about to call Yi Shiwen over. However, he saw that Yi Shiwen did not have any intention to join them. On the contrary, he was constantly killing the dead spirits and ferocious creatures. Wherever he passed, the dead spirits and ferocious creatures would be destroyed with a single touch. They were not a match for Yi Shiwen at all. Wherever he passed, he was like a huge bomb. He directly turned these dead spirits and ferocious creatures upside down. Although these dead spirits and ferocious creatures were also more ferocious than the previous one, they were obviously not on the same level as Yishuan. It was unknown how many dead spirits and ferocious creatures there were. They were densely packed and filled the sky. There were all kinds of dead spirits and ferocious creatures. They were all under the control of the peak profound life realm dead spirits and ferocious creatures. Compared to the 12 zodiac vengeful spirits that Yishuan encountered before, these peak profound life realm dead spirits and ferocious creatures were undoubtedly much stronger. Each of them was extremely ferocious. They looked abnormally terrifying and very powerful. As these dead spirits and ferocious creatures were constantly killed by Yishuan, Yishuan's first martial incarnation also began to become clearer and clearer after it condensed its original appearance. And ferocious spirits and ferocious creatures. It was not far from condensing the first martial incarnation. It was not very far. Yishuan didn't show any mercy when he thought of this. He directly used the Big Bang Stardust Fist and transformed it into a universe that swept across the sky. It crushed all these dead spirits and ominous creatures. Then, it completely transformed into martial power that filled the sky and was absorbed by him. Yishuan's massacre finally attracted the attention of the peak profound life realm dead spirits and ferocious creatures. The first to attack was an incomparably huge zombie. It was as huge as a small mountain. The first to charge forward were large, hairy zombies. These zombies were only at the sky human stage. However, their bodies were as tough as steel. Even the average profound life stage expert would find it hard to deal with these zombies. These zombies were wearing the clothes of various ancient times. It was unknown how long ago they had been transformed into zombies. Now, they had become the subordinates of the incomparably huge zombie king. These zombies pounced over and wanted to kill Yishuan. Yishuan slapped his palm and killed a group of zombies on the spot. Although these zombies had cultivated for many years and were powerful experts when they were alive, it also depended on who they were compared to. Compared to Yishuan, they were not a match at all. Basically, a group of them was killed by Yishuan in an instant. Suddenly, in the sky, a black claw directly fell down towards Yishuan. It instantly tore through the vast sky as if it wanted to grab Yishuan alive. Yishuan did not need to look to know that it should be the incomparably huge zombie attacking him. After letting him massacre for so long, even the stone-hearted dead spirits and ferocious spirits could not bear it anymore. However, for Yishuan, it came at the right time. He wanted to condense his first martial arts incarnation, and he lacked such a top existence. "Come on!" Yi Fuqian shouted and clenched his 5 fingers into a fist. In an instant, endless golden light burst out. He punched toward the void, and the fist will spread out in an instant, rendering the surroundings into a brand new universe. It was like a domain, but also like a huge new world. And in this world, he was the only true god. Clang! An incomparably loud collision sound was heard. Cracks appeared on the sharp claw. It was as if cracks had appeared on a piece of pottery. Originally, the physical body of a zombie was also one of the most powerful in the world. It even surpassed demonic beasts of the same level. It was not under the control of the heavens, nor was it restrained by the earth. The demonic beasts of the same level were simply worlds apart from the Qin Fang. It was simply impossible to compare them. In fact, there were even top-notch zombies that could kill dragons. There were also legends about the legendary Godly Ho, which was a variant of the zombies, or the ultimate form of the zombies' evolution. The Godly Ho was born to feed on dragon flesh, which was truly terrifying. However, he had never imagined that Yishuan's physical body would actually be so tyrannical. It would not be a problem for him to kill a dragon on the spot. Even though they were both at the peak of the profound life stage, Yishuan's strength was far more tyrannical than his. Roar! An incomparably loud roar resounded, and this hill-like zombie suddenly felt pain. Then, it instantly became ferocious, and clawed towards Yi Shiwen like a wounded beast, tearing through the air. Its eyes had turned red. Mountain of corpses and sea of blood. That zombie roared, and suddenly, an endless sea of blood slowly rose under Yi Shiwen's feet. In this endless sea of blood, there were innumerable corpses tumbling about. This sea of blood was actually unceasingly corroding Yi Shiwen's body, protecting Jinqi, and was slowly submerging him. This was his claw intent. In an instant, the ghostly claw of the zombie directly clawed down. Even the void was shattered, completely turning into a world of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that this zombie might not have been an ordinary person when it had been alive. In fact, it might have been a powerhouse of a region. Otherwise, it wouldn't have become so dreadful. Although zombies possess strength that far surpassed that of martial artists of the same level and realm, not all zombies could cultivate to such a level. Generally, the stronger one was in their previous life, the easier it would be for them to cultivate to an earth-shattering level. It was just like the spiritual intelligence within the physical body of the Lord of Darkness. If he was allowed to completely occupy the physical body of the Lord of Darkness, he would be comparable to a profound death realm expert, even if he did not know any martial arts. If he continued to cultivate, he would be able to overcome the heavenly tribulation and re-establish his Tao. It was even possible for him to become a corpse god. Yi Shiwen sneered. He did not care at all. Compared to when he had just stepped into the peak of the profound life realm, his strength was far more tyrannical. He immediately threw punch after punch. Fist shadows filled the sky and directly blasted through this world of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Boom! 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 The hill-like giant zombie continuously retreated. Every step it took caused the world to shake violently, and a loud roar could be heard. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes. He had already begun to develop his own spiritual intelligence. After he developed his own spiritual intelligence, no one could compete with him in terms of physical strength. He had also gradually awakened the memories of his previous life and began to learn martial arts. He was not afraid of the tyrannical zombie, but he was afraid of the zombie knowing martial arts. Right now, he was a zombie with extraordinary attainments in martial arts. However, it was a pity that the person he had met could not be judged by the logic of an ordinary person. However, what surprised him was that before he could even launch a counterattack, the next wave of attacks from this human actually followed him like a shadow. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's entire body was like a storm of wind and thunder. Behind him, a pair of incomparably huge wings spread out and directly opened up the domain of the power of wind and thunder. The power of wind and thunder in the sky transformed into a sharp sword of wind and thunder. It swept across invincible, forming a storm. All the undead and ferocious creatures were crushed into pieces on the spot. What was more frightening was that Yi Shiwen's strength would soar every time he killed an undead and ferocious creature. He absorbed the power of these undead and ferocious creatures and completely transformed it into his own power. Therefore, for others in this kind of group battle, the more they fought, the weaker they became. However, for Yi Shiwen, this was a sign that the more he fought, the stronger he became. This hill-like zombie twisted its body, and with a speed that was completely inconsistent with its incomparably huge body, it instantly clawed down towards Yi Shiwen. It simply ignored Yi Shiwen's attack and blasted a punch over to kill him. It wanted to gain the upper hand by striking first and behead Yi Shiwen. It was very confident in its own body. Today, this human had completely angered it. Even if it had to pay a price, it would not let this guy go. Clang! A loud roar sounded. It could not help but stare with its eyes wide open. Its earth-shattering attack was actually blocked. It saw that a diagram of life and death was rotating and completely blocking its attack. The huge aftermath caused by the yin-yang diagram of life and death was also completely absorbed. What is this? It could not help but murmur. Suddenly it reacted. Not good. Sure enough, at the moment when it was in a daze, in front of it, an incomparably huge fist instantly swept across and hit its head. Bang! Its entire head suddenly exploded like a watermelon. Chapter 1881. The entire body of the zombies was as hard as gold and iron. However, they also had a weakness, and that was their head. This point was the same as all the spirits of all living things. If their head exploded on the spot, their resentful spirits would have no place to reside. Even the resentful spirits hiding in their heads would be blown up on the spot by Yi Shiwen's fist. However, generally speaking, although the head was the weakest spot on a zombie's body, it was also the toughest spot on a zombie's body. Ordinary martial arts attacks would not be able to destroy their heads. If their heads were not destroyed, these zombies would very quickly grow back tenaciously. From this point of view, they were indeed immortal creatures. This zombie still wanted to continue struggling. It was still on its deathbed. However, how could Yi Shiwen give it the chance to do so? Immediately, a large hand pierced through the void and directly penetrated it. Then, a sharp flame directly ignited on the palm. After a short while, the zombie's body was burnt into a cloud of green smoke. All that was left was a sky full of martial power, which was devoured alive by Yi Shiwen on the spot. After devouring this zombie, Yi Shiwen immediately felt that his martial arts incarnation, which had just been condensed a little, had actually risen to 1/5 of its original level in an instant. Although the white-boned demon that he had encountered was also at the peak of the profound life realm, there was clearly a huge gap between it and this zombie. Haha, if this goes on, I'm afraid it won't be long before I can completely condense my first martial arts incarnation. Since that's the case, I won't hold back. He looked into the distance and saw several auras directly rushing over. It was not that he did not see Qin Li's summons. However, for him, condensing his first martial arts incarnation was more important. There was no need to be anxious about other matters. In the distance, Qin Li could not help but be secretly speechless when he saw Yi Shiwen easily destroy a peak of the profound life realm undead creature on the spot. How could he not know how ferocious those undead creatures at the peak of the profound life realm were? In fact, he had even fought against them a few times. Just now, when he was surrounded, those ferocious peak profound life stage dead spirit creatures had suddenly attacked him, engaging in an intense battle with him. These few were likely powerful existences that had already touched the profound death stage. Even though Qin Li was extraordinary, he had only just stepped into the peak of the profound life stage. He could barely deal with one of them. However, if he had to face the combined attacks of a few of them, it was likely that he would not be able to survive. If it wasn't for the fact that the few peak profound life stage evil creatures did not want to fight with him and wanted to exhaust them to death, he would have died long ago after being ambushed by so many evil creatures. Among them were even peak profound life stage evil creatures. However, such a tyrannical existence couldn't last long in Yi Shiwen's hands. He had become stronger again. Practically every time they met, even if it was only a short period of time, Yi Shiwen's changes would make him clearly feel that Yi Shiwen had become stronger. He had become stronger and stronger. Furthermore, he was becoming stronger and stronger. He was like a sports car that would never stop, constantly running. He believed that his improvement wasn't small and was practically improving all the time. However, when compared to Yi Shiwen, the gap between him and Yi Shiwen seemed to be continuously widening. Although he had already stepped into the peak of the profound life stage, there was clearly a huge gap between him and a powerful existence like Yi Shiwen, who was invincible at the peak of the profound life stage. In the sky, Yi Shiwen had just devoured all the power of the zombie. Immediately, another loud roar rang out. In the next moment, another incomparably huge flying zombie pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Despite being extremely far away, Yi Shiwen was still able to sense the deathly aura that blotted the sky. This was another zombie king that was not inferior to the previous one. No, it was even stronger and more tyrannical than the previous zombie king. This was because Yi Shiwen could sense a different aura of martial arts from this zombie. It wasn't the martial arts of zombies, but the martial arts of ordinary warriors. It wouldn't be strange for an ordinary warrior to have such a martial arts aura. However, this was a zombie. Zombies were born in places where the resentment and bad luck of the world gathered. They were abandoned by the 3 realms and 6 realms as soon as they were born. Therefore, their cultivation methods were independent and unique. There was only one possibility for such a martial arts aura to appear. It was the awakening of the memories of its previous life. Otherwise, how could it practice ordinary martial arts? This kind of zombie was even more terrifying, especially if it was a peerless powerhouse in its previous life. After awakening the memories of its previous life, coupled with the body of a zombie, it would become even more terrifying. World Domination Spear. It let out an incomparably loud roar. In the next moment, the flesh of its palm was instantly torn apart. The bones within seemed to be pulled out bit by some kind of power. It was an incomparably huge bone spear. With a terrifying spear aura, it directly shot towards Yishiwen. The spear aura stirred the world and shattered everything in all directions. It was very terrifying. Sure enough, this zombie has awakened the memories of its previous life. I'm afraid that its previous life should also be a general who fought on the battlefield. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. Yishiwen directly stretched out his big hand. It was like a golden sky curtain, grabbing towards that incomparably huge bone spear. Boom! A loud sound similar to the sound of gold and iron colliding rang out. Yishiwen's big hand directly grabbed the bone spear. The friction created sparks, and the sparks splashed in all directions. The sparks splashed to the side and actually caused a huge burst of flames. At this time, Yishiwen firmly grabbed the bone spear with one hand. He took advantage of this force and instantly appeared in front of this incomparably huge zombie. He directly kicked it. Boom! An incomparably dull rumbling sound was heard, and this incomparably huge zombie was sent flying on the spot. It was like a small hill, and it was heavily bombarded to the ground. Its entire chest had been crushed by Yishiwen's stomp, and a huge hole had appeared on its chest. Dark green blood was flowing out of it. This was a type of blood that was extremely poisonous. This zombie struggled and wanted to get up. It fiercely roared. It had suffered a big loss. An existence at the peak of the profound life realm had never suffered such a big loss unless it had encountered an existence at the profound death realm. Moreover, as it had awakened its memories, it could practice the martial arts of its previous life. It had become even more powerful than it had been in its previous life. An ordinary peak of the profound life realm was simply no match for it. It directly spat out a mouthful of corpse energy. Immediately, it formed a poisonous fog that filled the sky. It directly wrapped around Yishiwen, who was rushing over. It continuously corroded Yishiwen's protective chi, wanting to melt him while he was still alive. However, Yishiwen's speed was even faster. In an instant, he had already rushed out of the range of the poisonous fog. Then he directly punched the head of this zombie. Bang! This zombie was like the previous one. Its head directly exploded like a watermelon on the spot. Its physical body was also directly burned to ashes by the Nanmingli fire. Only the purest martial power was left, which Yishiwen fused into it. Yishiwen could only feel that his first martial arts incarnation had condensed by a third. It had directly reached 2/3. It was not far from forming. He was immediately overjoyed. As expected, if he wanted to quickly condense a martial arts incarnation, he would have to kill more existences at the peak of the profound life realm. It was completely incomparable to other undead realm undead creatures. Even the effects of ordinary profound life realm undead creatures were far from being comparable to this. However, Yishiwen was also a little worried. It was so difficult to form a martial arts incarnation. Where could he find so many existences at the peak of the profound life realm? Moreover, as he became stronger in the future, the opponents he would need to kill would also become stronger. If he had to condense it bit by bit and temper it, who knew how long it would take? However, this was not the time to think about this. It was better to first condense his first martial arts incarnation. Yishiwen did not take another look at this zombie. Zombies were neither human, ghost, demon, nor demon. They had transcended the 3 realms and 6 paths. They were not part of the 5 elements. Instinctively, There was a kind of rejection and disgust in his heart. Immediately, he charged toward the other undead creatures. At this time, Yi Shiwen's movements had already attracted the attention of this army of undead creatures. After all, he was too ferocious. Wherever he went, no one could stop him. Even the two zombie kings were completely killed by him. Suddenly, the last Jiangshi king, who had been calm and collected, finally made a move. Unlike the other two Jiangshi kings, which were like small mountains, this Jiangshi king was only the size of a normal person. However, it possessed a terrifying pressure that the other two Jiangshi kings did not possess. Swoosh! A huge sharp claw directly tore through the space and crushed towards Yi Shiwen. It was as fast as lightning. It did not give Yi Shiwen any chance to escape and directly enveloped him. Yi Shiwen didn't dare to be careless. He could feel that this zombie king was truly tyrannical and dreadful. The sky within a radius of 1,000 miles trembled under this claw. The shock wave formed by this claw had shattered all the dead spirits and ferocious creatures within a radius of 100 miles into powder. In order to kill Yi Shiwen, he did not care about accidental injuries at all. Moreover, these were nothing to him at all. A terrifying sense of oppression came crashing down on them. Yi Shiwen was not to be outdone. He directly swept up a huge storm and fiercely collided with this huge claw. I strongly recommend Chocolate Xinxiao novel Immeasurable True Immortal Ike Chocolate's latest masterpiece. Refreshing settings and a sense of leveling up made people's blood boil, and they applauded. Chocolate's two old books are fine works with 10,000 copies. Credibility and quality are guaranteed. Introduction of Immeasurable True Immortal Mortals Practice Immortality. Immortals practice Taoism, and Taoist ancestor practiced Taoism. Young Rosin, born with broken meridians, broke through the physical limit with great perseverance, formed a Taoist embryo, stepped on the path of immortality, and explored the secret of eternal life. There is a saying, if immortals can die, it is all fake. Immeasurable True Immortal is eternal. Chapter 1882. Bang! An incomparably loud collision sound was heard, and a large part of the void instantly collapsed. Countless elements of the earth, fire, water, and wind were suddenly thrown into chaos. It looked as if the end of the world had arrived. Countless evil spirits in the surroundings had already been swallowed up by the collapsing void. They didn't even have the time to scream before they were completely swallowed up. Yi Shiwen's next attack had already blasted into the depths of the void. His fist directly smashed into the depths of the void, shattering everything, revealing the figure of a huge white bone demon. He directly opened a space passage, and from the other side of the endless army of evil spirits, he rushed over. Yi Shiwen directly stepped out, directly crossing the space passage, and directly rushed in front of this incomparably huge white bone demon. This white bone demon's pair of bone wings were constantly flapping. It should be some kind of winged race, and its speed was also extremely fast. Seeing that Yi Shiwen was rushing over, it immediately roared and fiercely waved one of its hands. In an instant, in the sky, countless bone spikes directly pierced through the vault of heaven, directly piercing towards Yi Shiwen at an extremely fast speed. Dang! 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 A burst of crisp sounds of collision rang out, and these bone spikes directly pierced into Yi Shiwen's body, but simply could not pierce through Yi Shiwen's tyrant body. He casually waved his hand, and these bone spikes directly exploded. It was simply impossible to stop Yi Shiwen's advance, and in the blink of an eye, it had already rushed in front of him. At this time, this white bone demon finally issued a strange roar at this time. Great Heaven Fist! This white bone demon's fist blasted out and directly blasted out a huge heaven made of white bones and crushed down towards Yi Shiwen. This was a martial arts of the angel race. At this time, Yi Shiwen could also be said to be experienced at this time, more or less able to more or less see some clues. This martial arts was definitely the martial arts of the angel race. In other words, this white bone demon was very likely to be an expert of the angel race when it was alive, and then later died tragically in this place for unknown reasons, and then gave birth to spiritual wisdom, becoming a white bone demon. This punch transformed into a world of the heavens, crushing the heavens. Yi Shiwen's body remained motionless. His hands directly tore out endless golden light. The entire world shook violently between his movements. His big hands were like dragon claws, and they tore the heavenly world into two halves. Countless bones collapsed on the spot with a loud bang. Accept your judgment, sinful mortal. In the hollow eyes of this white bone demon, there was a bright, green, ghostly fire that began to emit bursts of light. His fist pressure had unexpectedly ignited a kind of golden flame. The flame of judgment had directly burned Yi Shiwen's golden light into powder. This was a very strange scene. This white bone demon was clearly formed from the extreme Yin Shi, but the martial arts it used were upright and righteous. At this moment, it was as if an angel had come back to life. You want to judge me with this kind of martial art? Yi Shiwen's eyes showed a hint of a smile. His whole body seemed to have been raised a few times, and his whole person was like a golden overlord. He blasted out a punch, and the entire world was shrouded in the golden fist energy. In an instant, the entire world had turned into a huge universe. At first glance, it was impossible to see where the end was. Yi Shiwen immediately activated the martial arts incarnation. Even if it was only a small part of it, it instantly made his combat power soar to the extreme. His whole person looked dazzling, like the only sun in the universe. Two huge fists collided fiercely. Bang! A violent roar sounded, and the angel race's white bone demon was forced to retreat on the spot by Yi Shiwen's punch. His originally incomparably sturdy fists had cracks on them, and densely packed like a spider web appeared on his bones. Originally, his bones were as white as jade. Even though he had turned into a white bone demon, he did not have the gloomy feeling of an ordinary bone demon. On the contrary, because he was originally from the angel race, he had a kind of majestic righteousness. At this moment, his bones had completely shattered. Roar! The white bone demon continued to roar, as if he was angry that Yi Shiwen had injured him. However, in the blink of an eye, he directly opened his pair of bone wings, and his body turned into a dazzling white light, intending to escape. At this moment, how could he not know that he had hit an iron plate? Although he was a bone demon, it did not mean that his intelligence was low. Over the countless years, his intelligence had been completely nurtured and was not inferior to that of an ordinary person with deep foresight. He was not stupid. He was about to step into the profound death realm. If he was not afraid of the heavenly tribulation of the profound death realm, he might have already gone through the tribulation and entered the profound death realm. Even so, his cultivation had gradually deepened over the years, allowing his strength to almost reach the peak of the profound life realm. However, the human in front of him was actually so terrifying. He had directly surpassed the limits of the profound life realm and was almost at the level of the profound death realm. His speed was extremely fast, and he directly tore through the space, intending to escape. However, Yi Shiwen's reaction speed was even faster. He suddenly stomped on the ground, and the entire sky shook violently like the surface of the water being blown by a violent gale. The space channel that the white bone demon had just torn and constructed collapsed on the spot. Immediately after, Yi Shiwen had already pounced in front of him and directly kicked him. Bang! A loud explosion sounded, and the white bone demon's body directly caved in from Yi Shiwen's kick. It was unknown how many of his bones were broken. These bones were crystal clear like jade, and were very good for refining weapons. However, under Yi Shiwen's foot, they were directly crushed like garbage. Golden divine light appeared on Yi Shiwen's foot. The moment he stepped into the white bone demon's body, the vengeful spirits that were attached to the skeleton were completely annihilated. Then, the white bone demon was grabbed by his big hand and exploded, turning into a sky full of power that surged into his martial arts incarnation. After devouring the white bone demon, Yi Shiwen's first martial arts incarnation was finally completely condensed. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen's entire body was boiling unceasingly. Waves of astonishing, imposing aura swept out in circles and transformed into a storm. Those dead spirits and ominous creatures that didn't have enough time to retreat were bombarded into pieces on the spot. After condensing the first martial arts incarnation, Yi Shiwen was still unable to completely control it, and still needed some time to adapt. At this moment, he stood in the sky like a god. At this moment, the dead spirits and ferocious creatures had long been terrified by Yi Shiwen. Although they were all dead creatures, it did not mean that they did not have intelligence. In addition, the few powerful, undying, ferocious creatures had all been killed by Yi Shiwen. So how could they continue to stay? In an instant, the mighty army of dead spirits dispersed like birds and beasts. At this moment, Yi Shiwen, who was still feeling the power of the first martial arts incarnation, did not have the time to care about them. As for the people from the martial sect who had escaped, why would they continue to look for trouble? He actually succeeded? Qin Lai said in disbelief. The principle of capturing the leader of the bandits was a very common military strategy. However, it was easy to say, to capture the bandits, one must first capture the leader. However, these leaders often represented the strongest group of people. If they wanted to capture the leader of the bandits, they also needed to have the strength to do so. Even the strongest among them was only comparable to the strength of the leaders of the dead spirits and ferocious creatures. To think that Yi Shiwen could eradicate all the dead spirits and ferocious creatures with such ease was simply impossible. As for the people from the martial sect, they could not help but breathe a sigh of relief when they saw that Yi Shiwen had defeated the army of dead spirits and ferocious creatures. In any case, they had cooperated with Yi Shiwen before. Although they were not necessarily allies, they were not enemies. This Yi Shiwen's strength is stronger than before. It's really terrifying. With such a cultivation speed, he must have a very mysterious inheritance behind him. Otherwise, it is impossible. Yes, that's right. However, we have never heard of this Yi Shiwen before. Young master, did you know this Qin Lai in the ancient wilderness? I didn't expect the ancient demon realm to produce such an amazing person after so many years of decline. Could it be that he has some luck? Yes, I have also heard of the ancient demon realm. Although there are a few good geniuses, they should not be as terrifying as Yi Shiwen. However, speaking of which, the celestial phoenix lady of the ancient phoenix realm, Hua Minghan, also came from the ancient demon realm. There are also a few others. Is it a collective revival? Someone murmured. For them, the ancient demon realm was too much to ask for. That's not right. Look at him. Is he condensing a martial arts incarnation? Suddenly, someone pointed at the looming shadow of the fist incarnation behind Yi Shiwen and said, "What? How is this possible? We have seen him fight with Jun Dingtian before. At that time, he should not have even touched the threshold of condensing martial arts incarnation. I can't be wrong. How could he actually condense martial arts incarnation in such a short time? It's unbelievable. If that's the case, then it would explain why his strength has soared in such a short period of time. After condensing the martial arts incarnation, his strength has doubled, and his combat power has increased by more than doubled." Qin Lai looked at Yi Shiwen with disbelief in his eyes. Yi Shiwen had actually condensed a martial Dao incarnation and was ahead of him once again. No, I can't go on like this. Otherwise, I will fall further and further behind and will only become a stepping stone on the road to certification. At this time, Yi Shiwen, who was in the sky, seemed to have finally fully adapted to the power of the first martial arts incarnation. The surging aura on his body also gradually calmed down, and he opened his eyes. Chapter 1883. After condensing the first martial arts incarnation, the fist incarnation could not be used immediately. It was the same concept as a child suddenly mastering the power of an adult. It could not be mastered immediately. However, he mastered it quickly. After condensing the fist incarnation, Yi Shiwen could feel that his strength had risen to a whole new level. For example, the Angel Clan's Whitebone Demon was almost on par with him in terms of skill. If they were to really fight, it would take a lot of time even if he won without condensing the martial arts incarnation. It would not be like this, where he was almost defeated easily. It was a completely different concept. Just like before, when Yi Shiwen faced Jun Dingtian, he could feel that he was too powerless even though he had already climbed to the peak of the profound life realm. He opened his eyes and took a step forward. He came directly in front of Qin Lai and the martial arts great sect. "Brother Qin, good day," Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Qin Lai's face showed a bit of a forced smile. "Are you really not a monster? We haven't seen each other for a short time, and you are getting stronger and stronger. This time, you even condensed the martial arts incarnation. If this goes on, I will be further and further away from you," Qin Lai could not help but say with a bitter smile. Originally, when he first met Yi Shiwen, he inevitably felt that he had a slight advantage. Compared to Yi Shiwen, who was a country bumpkin from the ancient wilderness, he was different. Even in the heavens and realms, martial arts great sect was a colossal existence. There were countless experts in the martial arts great sect, and it had almost become the representative of the human forces in the heavens and realms. Compared to the martial arts great sect, the Yi clan that Yi Shiwen belonged to only had a bit of power in the ancient wilderness. It was completely incomparable to a real giant like the martial arts great sect, who knew that the country bumpkin that he did not pay much attention to back then had now grown to such an extent. "Haha, Brother Qin, you must be joking." Yi Shiwen laughed out loud. He had just condensed the first martial arts incarnation and was in a good mood. He did not care about Qin Lai's little joke. "But are you also going to find the inheritance of the Lord of Dead Spirits?" Qin Lai asked. "Yes." Yi Shiwen did not hesitate and did not lie. There was nothing to hide. What a coincidence. We're actually going to find the Lord of the Dead Spirits' inheritance too. To be honest, Brother Yi, we've already made some progress, so we're going to meet up with the elders," Qin Lai said straightforwardly. This made Yi Shiwen a little surprised. He thought that Qin Lai would beat around the bush. Now, with the improvement of his strength, the relationship between the two of them should have been Qin Lai leading Yi Shiwen. But now it was somewhat reversed. At the very least, the relationship between the two of them was equal. "Aren't you afraid of telling me? And then I'll snatch it away," Yi Shiwen said in a somewhat playful manner. "If it's meant to be, it'll happen in the end. If it's not meant to be, then don't force it. Moreover, this news is about to spread, and you'll soon receive the news as well. Instead of that, I might as well do you a favor at little cost. Isn't that better?" Qin Lai said frankly, without the slightest shyness or pretense. "And no. Yi, at how great he said, Yi martial arts incarnation. Martial arts. Yi." At this time, there was no need to be too calculative about trivial matters. "Well, I owe you a favor." Yi Shiwen laughed out loud. If Yi Shiwen hesitated, he would be looked down upon. "Haha, compared to the fact that you've saved us twice, this bit of information is nothing. However, when it comes to the fight for the inheritance, I won't show any mercy," Qin Lai said with a smile. "Why can't I?" Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Qin Lai's unabashed attitude left a very favorable impression on him. He was not pretentious at all. This was a good friend, although he still had a bit of a utilitarian heart. But so what? Didn't he also want to be on good terms with a colossus like the martial sect? "Since you're also going to fight for the Lord of the Dead Spirits' inheritance, why don't we go together?" Qin Lai said. "Done." Yi Shiwen nodded and agreed. With the help of the martial sect, he would undoubtedly be able to save a lot of effort. Yi Shiwen joined the martial sect's group and began to fly towards the depths of the Dead Soul Plane. Although there were dead spirit creatures constantly attacking them along the way, with Yi Shiwen and Qin Lai, who were experts at the peak of the profound life realm, the ordinary dead spirit creatures were no match for them at all. They were directly smashed apart. Hence, their speed of advancement was not slow at all. In less than half a day, they had reached the depths of the dead spirit's abyss and arrived at the entrance of an underground ruin. The inheritance of the Lord of the Dead Spirits was in this underground ruin. Yi Shiwen rushed over at this time, but it was already a bit late. Many forces had already rushed over. Qin Lai and the others quickly entered the martial sect's camp and met up with them. Different from the martial sect experts who had gone to the Dark Lord's treasury, these martial sect experts who were searching for the inheritance of the Lord of the Dead Spirits were much stronger. In the treasury of the Darkness Master, There were pitifully few experts at the peak of the profound life realm. There were only a few like Yi Shiwen. However, in this place, there were already a few experts at the peak of the profound life realm among the martial grandmasters. Moreover, their auras were long and they looked dignified. Obviously, they were not ordinary experts at the peak of the profound life realm. Although they hid it well, Yi Shiwen could still see through them. These people were very strong. If Yi Shiwen hadn't gone to the Dark Lord's treasure house before the battle with Jun Dingtian, he wouldn't have been a match for any one of them. However, the situation was different now. Yi Shiwen was very confident and there was nothing to worry about. The martial sect was led by a middle-aged martial artist. He was dressed in a tight outfit and looked very straightforward. However, he revealed a valiant aura. Not bad, not bad. As expected, this kind of thing is the best way to hone oneself. How long has it been? You have already entered the peak of the profound life realm. I'm afraid it won't be long before you surpass us old bones. A satisfied smile appeared on the middle-aged martial artist's face. He didn't feel anything even though Qin Lai's cultivation had surpassed his. Instead, he felt that the new generation would always surpass the old. This was how a sect should flourish. Elder Lu, you flatter me, Qin Lai said respectfully. Even though his cultivation had already caught up to this middle-aged martial practitioner, he still remembered the care that this Elder Lu had given him over the years. It would not change just because his cultivation had increased. However, what's going on? When we sent the message, we did not make it clear. What's going on? Why aren't we going in? Haven't we already discovered the location of the tomb? At this moment, Elder Lu smiled slightly bitterly and said, "We have indeed discovered the location of the tomb. It should have already been opened. However, there are some disgusting things at the entrance of the tomb ruins. It is because of them that we cannot enter." Hearing this, Yi Shiwen turned his gaze towards the entrance of the ruins. Sure enough, there were traces of a fight at the entrance of the ruins. Moreover, there was a lot of blood splattering out. It seemed as if someone had been killed on the spot. There were also some minced meat and broken bones scattered near the entrance. It was obvious that an intense battle had occurred. "What's going on? What's in there?" Qin Lai asked hurriedly. "I'm not sure what kind of filthy things it is. You should know that this kind of tomb gathers the darkest aura in the world. It is possible for some filthy things to be born. Moreover, the abyss of dead souls is the darkest place in the profound world. Moreover, the Lord of Dead Souls is such an existence. It would not be strange for anything to be in his tomb." Elder Lu shook his head and said, he still did not know. Qin Lai did not continue to ask. In this world, there were many existences that were far beyond the understanding of ordinary people. By the way, Elder Lu, I forgot to introduce you. This is Yi Shiwen. I mentioned him in the previous message. He was the one who saved us from the hands of Jun Dingtian. On the way here, we encountered the army of dead souls. He was also the one who saved us. I owe him 2 lives. Qin Lai introduced Yi Shiwen to Elder Lu. Yi Shiwen, this is Elder Lu. He has always taken care of me. He is a senior that I respect very much. Elder Lu solemnly saluted Yi Shiwen and said, although Qin Lai is still young, he is the hope of our martial sect's new generation. You have saved him, which means you have saved the hope of our martial sect's new generation. It was just a matter of convenience. You don't have to be so polite, Elder. Yi Shiwen said, it might be a matter of convenience for you. However, it is completely different for our martial sect. In short, I will also report this matter to the main sect. In the future, you will be our distinguished guest. If there are any changes in the future, you can also go to the heavenly realm. I can't guarantee anything else, but the martial sect can still protect you. Elder Lu said with a serious look on his face. This made Yi Shiwen somewhat depressed. Elder Lu's words clearly meant that he would definitely be chased like a stray dog and flee to the heavenly realm. However, he also knew that Elder Lu had good intentions, so he did not flare up. Yi Shiwen, Elder Lu's words are more direct. Don't mind him. However, you better be careful. You have slaughtered the people of the Divine Union. I'm afraid that they will not let this matter rest. Qin Lai said to Yi Shiwen with some embarrassment. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.